Hey guys, tonight we unfold our bedroll right on the chilly lava fields of medieval Iceland, letting the midnight sun smear pink watercolor across the sky while the smell of damp moss drifts in from the fissures. You press a palm against black basalt still warm from the day, and a thin thread of steam winds up between your fingers, as if the earth herself is sighing out a bedtime lullaby. A few paces ahead rises the Rock or Logberg, a stubborn slab jutting like the prow of a stone ship into the grassy assembly ground. Around it, hundreds of weather-beaten settlers shuffle woolen cloaks, mutter about sheep rights, and casually pretend they did not just travel days through sleet to argue about whose ram munched whose barley. One whiff of their fermented milk breath tells you this is no ordinary neighborhood HOA meeting. Yet, you probably won't survive this if you forget to bow to the chieftain whose beard doubles as portable insulation. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge toward the heart of Thingvellir, feeling turf squish softly under sealskin shoes. A raven circles and offers completely unsolicited commentary, caw caw, welcome to the oldest continuous parliament in the world. That's not just trivia for your next pub quiz. It is a mainstream historical fact. In the year 930, the Icelandic Althing was formally established, gathering free men, chieftains, and the occasional opinionated sheep for annual debate. Of course, free women attended too, though records mention them mostly when someone needed a witness with good hearing. Apparently centuries of gossip sharpened ears into precision instruments as you weave through tense smelling of peat smoke and boiled root stew. A skinny farmhand waves a carved sheep-bone spoon at you and cracks what passes for a joke in 10th century Iceland. Keep walking, stranger, or the breeze will file taxes on you. You're not entirely sure what he means, but you laugh politely, because the last time someone ignored Nordic humor it resulted in 3 sagas and a passive-aggressive runestone. Joke 1 firmly delivered. Closer to the Rock, you notice a low wooden platform where the law speaker will stand at dawn. Mainstream fact number 2, except we only promised 1 per section, so let's keep this crisp. The law speaker served a 3-year term and was expected to recite 1/3 of the entire legal code from memory each summer. Historians still argue whether these oral recitations were aided by subtle rune-inscribed sticks tucked in the sleeve, or whether Icelandic memories ran on a kind of early USB drive made of dried herring. Remember the raven. It swoops down again, steals a breadcrumb from your cloak pocket, and clucks approvingly. Fringe tidbit incoming. Some 13th century annals claim a particularly dramatic law speaker used a puff-and-beak whistle to call proceedings to order, allegedly because thunderous horn blasts startled pregnant ewes grazing nearby. Modern scholars raise an eyebrow at the idea. Puffin fashion has always been controversial, but the mental picture of a stern jurist tooting a rainbow beak is too delightful to discard before bedtime. Joke 2 achieved. Medieval courtroom kazoo. Anyone? You settle on a lichen-spotted rock and eavesdrop on the current hot case. Sheep trespassing across invisible property lines. Turns out in a land without fences, defining pasture boundaries is trickier than convincing your cat to pay rent. 2 neighboring farmers gesticulate with knitted mittens the size of bread loaves, each insisting his woolly delinquents are innocent angels born exclusively to chew approved grass. The crowd leans in, not just for the drama but for the chance to warm themselves with collective body heat in this natural amphitheater of cracked volcanic plates. The Rock itself rises head-high, flecked with quartz that catches the light like sleepy fireflies. You reach out, brush its rough surface, and feel centuries of declarations vibrating like distant drums. There's a superstition that the stone remembers every vow spoken upon it. If that's true, it now holds a pretty impressive playlist. Boundary disputes, marriage contracts, and at least 3 oaths regarding proper etiquette for sharing whale blubber. Quirky as it sounds, some locals swear you can hear faint mumbling after dark, though skeptics argue it's just the wind practicing its stand-up routine. Joke 3 softly lands. The sun hardly sets in Nordic summer, but a curtain of low fog glides over the valley, muffling distant waterfalls until they sound like someone slowly tearing parchment in another room. You pull your cloak tighter, listening as a gray-bearded mediator quotes stanza after stanza from Gragas, the Grey Goose Laws, pointing out that compensation for a single sheep's illegal snacking might be 1 ounce of silver or, in certain regions, a particularly handsome puppy. Historians still debate the exchange rate of handsome puppies, especially when the puppy in question grows into a dog large enough to eat your winter stores. Someone passes you a wooden cup of sour whey, the medieval Icelandic equivalent of a decaf nightcap. The taste is, let's say, memorable, but you sip politely, feeling the tang coat your tongue like wool dipped in lemonade. Another farmhand tells you about the so-called moonlight sheep, an alleged breed that glowed faintly at night, handy for midnight roundups. Fringe legend, certainly, yet chronicles by Ari the Learned mention luminous fleece with suspiciously straight face. Whether it was bioluminescent moss in the wool or early marketing hype, historians still argue whether these glowing ewes ever existed outside exaggerated tavern tales. The debating farmers finally quiet as the mediator proposes a solution. Erect stone cairns to mark agreed pastures, each cairn topped with an upside-down ram skull as visual deterrent. Practicality meets decor, so very Icelandic. You imagine future hikers puzzling over these skeletal signposts. The island's tourism board will thank them later. Night, or what passes for night, settles deeper. Campfires flicker, and the smell of charred Arctic thyme perfumes the air. You recline against your rock pillow, content to watch silhouettes of distant glaciers shining like frosted glass under a pearly sky. The sheep bleat in sleepy chorus, and you realize their rhythmic bass sync neatly with your breathing, an accidental ASMR track custom-built by nature. Before your eyes drift closed, a final whisper from the lower rock seems to rumble beneath you. Justice is a slow kettle, always simmering, rarely boiling over. In medieval Iceland, even a simple grazing dispute can weave its way into poem, law, and dinner conversation by the same hearth. With that warm, wool-covered thought, you let your shoulders loosen, ready to dream through the next twist in the tale. The pale glow of what masquerades as dawn seeps through the fog like a shy candle, nudging you awake before you've even finished last night's dream about luminous sheep staging a pasture fashion show. You stretch beneath the scratchy wool blanket someone kindly loaned you, though loaned is a strong word when the owner is still snoring next to a puddle of spilled sour whey. The ground feels softer than expected, thanks to a cushion of moss that's politely decided not to stain your cloak. Tiny courtesies matter out here, especially when you can't pop down to a medieval laundromat. You inhale crisp air laced with sulfur and wood smoke, then sit up just in time to see the law speaker ascend the wooden platform atop the low rock. His cloak flaps grandly, catching stray gull feathers because apparently even capes want their own decorations. You wonder if later he'll discover the feathers and assume he molted overnight. Joke one flutters into place. The assembly, or althing, rustles like an eager audience before a cozy theater performance, though the seats here are damp boulders and the ushers are two bored boys juggling sheep droppings for applause. Mainstream historical fact for our morning. Attendees of the althing built temporary turf and wood booths called bear, pop-up legal boutiques, if you will, where they ate, traded, and occasionally plotted marriage alliances between people who hadn't technically met yet. Think farmer's market meets courthouse meets speed dating. You sidestep one such booth whose sign, etched in charcoal, advertises fresh skier, slightly opinionated. The law speaker clears his throat, a sound reminiscent of a walrus gargling gravel, and begins reciting segments of Gragas in a rolling cadence. The crowd hushes, except for a toddler who instantly decides this is the perfect time to test the acoustics with a banshee shriek. An elderly woman pats the child's head, hands over a carved wooden horse, and stage whispers, "Pretend it's the law speaker. Make it gallop sensibly." Joke 2 trots out elegantly, today's marquee case. Trespassing sheep continue to wreak social havoc. The mediator, now sporting a dramatic puff and feather pin you recognize from last night's rumor mill, outlines witness testimonies. One shepherd claims he tracked hoofprints across a thawing river, which sounds heroic until you realize the river was ankle-deep, and the shepherd spent most of his time rescuing his own sandals from sticky mud. Fringe tidbit arrives. An Icelandic folktale insists that crossing water confuses sheep so completely they temporarily forget which flock they belong to, resulting in a phenomenon locals call wool amnesia. Whether that's truth or convenient excuse, historians still argue whether watercrossing memory loss was actual livestock behavior or just a rustic way to dodge fines. As the debate drones on, you wander toward a nearby booth where two women stitch elaborate runic patterns into mittens. They gossip about yesterday's whisper that the law speaker might introduce a new bylaw penalizing unruly dogs that bark during legal recitations. One woman snickers, "If the dogs pay silver, Who carries their coin purse? You imagine a dignified sheepdog wearing a tiny pouch like a medieval fanny pack. Joke 3 fetches itself and wags. A raven, the same bold commentator from last night, lands atop the booth pole, tilts its glossy head, and seems to critique the stitching. You remember its earlier breadcrumb theft and guard your cloak pockets. The bird caws twice, as if reminding you that ravens are Odin's messengers and therefore unionized against boredom. Mainstream fact check. In medieval Iceland, ravens held symbolic significance. Sailors released them to find land, trusting the birds would head shoreward. Your inner voice wonders if modern GPS ever feels overshadowed by a creature whose only expense is leftover porridge. Back at the Low Rock, the mediator references precedent from a saga involving a rogue ram nicknamed Fencefinder, reputedly able to sniff out any weak spot in boundary cairns. Some records claim the ram was so notorious its owner fitted it with a wooden bell carved like a miniature longship, both to identify it and to humiliate it into obedience. Fringe as that sounds, a fragmentary poem about Fencefinder exists, though scholars debate if the bell's shape is poetic exaggeration or early brand management, because nothing says troublemaker like clanging down a hillside wearing your own Nordic sponsorship. The law speaker's voice rolls through stanzas about compensation. 1 ounce of silver per tree damaged, 1 ounce per sheep lost, and here's an eyebrow raiser, 2 ounces if the trespass took place on holy ground, presumably because divine grass costs extra. Historians still argue whether that surcharge deterred wayward flocks or merely encouraged priests to expand definitions of holy whenever finances look tight. The crowd murmurs approval. No one wants a heavenly ledger listing unpaid grazing fees. You catch yourself shivering as a wind gusts snakes between the lava plates. Someone thrusts a mug of steaming birch bark tea into your hands. The flavor resembles hot furniture polish, yet the warmth seeps delightfully through your mittens. While you sip, a young skald belts out a quick verse praising the taste of birch bark brew, claiming it tickles the tongue like a wolf pup's whisker. You applaud lightly. 2 claps feel sufficient for impromptu culinary poetry. The morning drifts on and barter tables open for business. Silver bracelets, amber beads, and walrus ivory chess pieces change hands with minimal haggling. Everyone's conserving energy for the legal fireworks. You overhear a merchant bragging that his chess set depicts mythic heroes. The king piece, he insists, is modeled after a legendary Viking who once convinced an entire herd of goats to board a boat single file. Fringe story? Absolutely. Yet goat herding onto narrow ships was a genuine logistical challenge, and historians still argue whether heroic sagas inflated animal wrangling exploits to mythic proportions or if Vikings simply owned surprisingly obedient goats. Just before midday, clouds part, revealing glaciers glittering at the horizon like giant crystal pastries dusted in powdered sugar. The sight momentarily quiets the crowd, nature dropping a microphone with icy finesse. You breathe deep, letting the cold fill your lungs, then exhale plume after plume like a sleepy dragon. Somewhere a drummer boy practices rhythm on an overturned bucket, giving the valley a mellow heartbeat. The mediator announces a recess so parties can calculate fines or invent alibis, whichever seems more feasible. You seize the break to stroll along the rift's edge where tectonic plates meet. The ground splits in gentle steps, and from a crevice rises steam scented faintly of eggs, a reminder that Iceland's geothermal spa potential has been simmering for millennia. Mainstream fact. Settlers sometimes cooked bread in hot springs, burying dough in linen for a slow bake. You imagine loaf after loaf emerging perfectly crusted, each slice whispering, "See, sourdough starters are nothing new." As you peer into the steamy crack, you spot coins glittering below, tossed by hopeful litigants seeking legal luck. Someone claims that if the coin lands upright on its rim, victory in court is assured. The odds are, of course, astronomically low, but hope springs eternal, and so do these geothermal vents. Historians still argue whether such coin tosses were genuine folk ritual or just early tourism gimmickry. Come for the lawsuits, stay for the hot spring wishing well. The raven swoops past again, dropping a single black feather at your feet before vanishing into the thermal mist. Perhaps payment for last night's breadcrumb? You tuck the feather behind your ear, instant medieval hipster accessory. Joke 4? Let's call it a bonus. Featherlight and free, the horn sounds, signaling the resumption of proceedings. You turn back toward the low rock, ready for whatever twist the sheep saga takes next. Maybe glowing ewes will testify under oath. Maybe Fencefinder will stage a jailbreak. Or maybe, just maybe, the law speaker's cloak will finally shed its accidental gull feathers, fluttering down like confetti to celebrate compromise. The suspense tingles, the wind hums, and you find your pulse sinking again with that distant bucket drum beat. The day is young, the law is long, and your cozy front row stone seat awaits. You shuffle back toward the low rock, clutching your new raven feather like a VIP pass to this wool-fueled courtroom drama. The fog thins, sunbeams hopscotch across the valley, and the chieftains, called Gore, take their places in a semicircle that feels half tribunal, half dad band reunion. Mainstream historical fact slipping gently into your ear. Each gua represented a district, settling disputes and collecting a modest tax paid in butter, wool, or in one documented case, a particularly cooperative goose. You picture that goose arriving with a tiny invoice tucked under its wing, then honking approval when the ledger balances. Joke one quacks softly. The mediator unfurls a sealskin scroll streaked with ink and mutton grease. According to fresh witness statements, last night Fencefinder the ram pulled another Houdini, squeezing through 2 cairns, a thicket of dwarf birch, and, allegedly, a child's picnic blanket. The owner of the blanket wants damages for grass stains shaped like sheep hooves. You stifle a grin. Icelandic small claims court has range. The law speaker, still sporting stray gull feathers, calls for tangible evidence, prompting a shepherd to brandish a tuft of wool that indeed looks guilty. Fringe tidbit breezes in on a cool gust. Ear-notching served as medieval Iceland's version of barcode scanning. Each snip pattern belonged to a family, and some notches grew so elaborate that passers-by claimed the sheep looked like feathered dragons. Historians still argue whether ear-notch complexity indicated wealth, pure boredom, or an unspoken competition to design the island's fanciest ovine earwear. You lean closer, half expecting the law speaker to launch a runway show titled Project Fleeceway. Joke 2 struts the catwalk, a gua with a beard wider than your pillow cites precedent from the saga of the unruly lamb, insisting any sheep repeatedly found trespassing may be escorted to the next district for pasture exile. The crowd ooze as if watching a soap opera cliffhanger. You recall yesterday's birchbark tea, wonder if pasture exile includes beverage upgrades, and decide a travel mug of hot spring latte might sweeten the banishment. The law speaker taps his staff, fashioned from driftwood and inlaid with shiny fish scales, announcing a new phase, forensic reenactment. 2 teenagers volunteer to play stand-in sheep, wrapping themselves in spare blankets and bleeding with comedic commitment. You, now honorary dramaturge, provide gentle applause. One youth trips over the other's blanket, toppling into a puddle and splattering everyone within 5 feet. The valley erupts in muffled chuckles. Joke 3 splashes grandly, while the sheep wring water from their improvised wool. A skald recites a verse reminding listeners that property lines, like memories, drift with time. Mainstream fact number 2, though we need only 1 per section, but here's a cameo. Thingvelir's volcanic rifts shift a centimeter or 2 each year, subtly redrawing landmarks. No wonder sheep wander. The ground itself won't stay still. The mediator presents a compromise: erect living fences of willow cuttings. The shrubs root quickly in Iceland's moist soil, forming gentle barriers that won't impale unsuspecting ewes. A murmur of acceptance ripples through the crowd, though one farmer frets willow will whisper secrets to trolls at night. Fringe claim? Very. Yet you can't entirely dismiss it. Last evening's steam vents did sound suspiciously giggly. Historians still argue whether troll folklore arose from seismic groans echoing through lava tubes, or from farmers blaming mythical neighbors for borrowed tools never returned. A brief recess lets tempers cool and stomachs rumble. Vendors circulate with skewers of smoked puffin. Apparently the bird is versatile beyond whistle fashion, and honeyed rye flatbread baked on hot stones. You savor a bite, pleasantly surprised. The sweetness balances the salty puffin like a lullaby for your taste buds. A nearby merchant cracks that puffin tastes like fancy chicken that paid for voice lessons. You nearly choke on flatbread laughter. During the snack break, you revisit your moss-lined seat, only to find Fencefinder himself sniffing your cloak. The ram's bells, yes, 2 now, an upgrade from his wooden longship model, jingle softly. You attempt polite conversation, offering a blade of grass like a bribe, and the ram munches thoughtfully before trotting away, perhaps to scout new culinary frontiers. You wonder if glowing sheep rumors started with this adventurous gourmand discovering phosphorescent moss. A shadow passes overhead. Our favorite raven executes a dignified barrel roll, drops a pebble onto the low rock, and caws triumphantly. You suppose that's raven for objection sustained. Seconds later, a toddler imitates the bird, flinging his own pebble but missing by several feet and pelting his father instead. Cue collective gasp followed by relieved laughter when Dad merely shrugs, proclaiming, "At least his aim's improving. The valley loves a forgiving punchline." Court is back in session. The mediator, now wearing spectacles carved from bone, quite the scholarly flex, asks both farmers to testify under oath. Oath-taking here involves touching a silver-inlaid Thor's hammer amulet while reciting a promise to speak truth as surely as glaciers move. You note the beautiful irony. Glaciers do indeed move, they just take their sweet, bedtime-friendly time. The first farmer claims his herd includes no rams capable of cairn hopping, citing recent hoof strain injuries. The second counters with a charcoal sketch of fence-finder midleap, an early comic strip panel, perhaps. The law speaker examines the drawing, compliments the shading, then reminds everyone that artistic talent, while admirable, does not equal legal proof. Historians still argue whether courtroom doodles influenced verdicts or merely launched Iceland's graphic novel scene 8 centuries early. As discussion spiral, you catch snippets about puppy-based fines again. Evidently, the handsome puppy exchange rate rose after a notable litter of blue-eyed sheepdogs stole the social spotlight. Local gossip spins tales of owners styling the pup's fur into braids, ushering them around like tiny celebrity judges. You add puppy inflation to your growing list of reasons medieval economics deserves its own bedtime sitcom. The sun dips briefly, brushing the horizon with molten gold before climbing back up, northern latitudes playing peekaboo with night. A hush settles. This is the magic hour when colors fade to dusky lavender, perfect for long contemplative breaths. You inhale slowly, remembering the scent of sour whey, birch bark tea, and now smoked puffin mingling in a mellow perfume of history. Finally, the law speaker raises both hands, gull feathers fluttering like reluctant confetti. He declares preliminary consensus. Living willow fences shall mark the contested pasture, funded jointly by both farmers. Fencefinder earns a free-range pardon on condition his bells remain double-strapped for easy identification. The audience offers soft claps, because loud applause might spook the ram into scaling yet another cairn. Settlement reached, at least for now. You feel an unexpected swell of satisfaction, as if world peace were achieved through shrubbery. Tired yet content, you rise, joints creaking like ancient barn doors, and survey Thingvelir's vast plain. Campfires bloom one by one, flickers bouncing off lava walls like lanterns guiding sleepy thoughts. You tuck the raven feather deeper into your cloak and think of tomorrow. More debates, more steaming bread, perhaps a cameo by moonlight sheep in full glowing regalia. For now, though, the valley exhales. Someone strums a lyre, plucking notes that drift upward before settling on your shoulders like downy snow. You decide to follow those notes to the nearest turf booth, where your borrowed blanket, and hopefully not its original owner, awaits. As you walk, each footstep feels lighter, cushioned by moss, soothed by low conversation, and buoyed by the gentle certainty that even in a world of shifting ground and mischievous rams, people can still agree on fences made of living green. Dawn drifts in like an absent-minded houseguest, tapping politely at your eyelids with pale pink fingers until you crack them open and wonder, for 2 disoriented seconds, whose turf roof you're staring at. Right, Thingvellir, heart of medieval Icelandic diplomacy and, apparently, the world's most scenic sleepover spot. A thread of peat smoke coils through the booth's entrance flap, coaxing you upright. You emerge into brisk air that smells of wet lichen and yesterday's puffin skewers reheating for breakfast. Nothing says rise and shine like recycled seabird. A trio of goats clip-clop past your boots, their little beards crusted with frost crystals that wink in the slanted light. One goat pauses, stares you down, then snorts as if to say, "Nice bedhead, mine's natural." Joke 1 tosses its horns and prances away. You shuffle toward the low rock, tightening your cloak and adjusting the raven feather so it perches at a jaunty barred angle. Overnight, the living willow compromise has already sprouted enthusiasm. Volunteers carrying bundles of green cuttings hustle across the field, arguing about optimal spacing. Mainstream historical fact glides in. In addition to annual general sessions, the Althing contained quarter courts, spring and autumn mini-meetings where unresolved cases could be appealed or fines renegotiated. Today, the quarter court judges assemble off to your left, for stern figures seated on upturned barrels like a somber game of musical chairs. You overhear one complain that the barrel still smells of pickled herring, but nobly he endures. Justice, after all, requires sacrifice and the occasional fishy backside. Between the courts and the campfires, a cluster of children chase Fencefinder, who now sports a third bell, this one bright copper, probably donated by a sentimental smith who felt the ram needed surround sound. Each jingle produces a slightly different pitch, turning the chase into an accidental wind chime concert. You applaud the impromptu melody, musing that if Spotify existed, Ram with Bells, Ambient Edition, would top the relaxation charts. Joke 2 dings softly. The law speaker strides by, having finally plucked the gull feathers from his cloak. In their place, he wears an embroidered badge depicting Thor wrestling a sheep. He claims it is symbolic. Everyone else thinks it's merchandising. Fringe tidbit time. Some saga fragments mention roadside stalls selling souvenir runestones carved with memorable trial verdicts, portable bragging rights for litigants. Whether these stones were genuine artifacts or medieval gag gifts is uncertain, and historians still argue whether the fragments describe real commerce or bardic satire aimed at overzealous tourists who, let's face it, will buy anything with runes. A horn blast summons attendees to the quarter court. You squeeze between two burlap-wrapped merchants debating currency. Silver bracelets versus dried cod, classic fiscal dilemma, and claim a lava rock seat. Today's docket kicks off with a curious appeal. A fisherman insists his neighbor's sheep frighten the fish away by bleating too loudly near the riverbank. The neighbor retorts that the fish clearly lacked professional resilience. The judges exchange looks that say, "Is this our life now?" The lead judge unfurls parchment and cites a provision on livestock nuisances, but pauses to note the absence of decibel measuring runes. The assembly titters. You remember the puffin-beak whistle rumor and imagine equipping sheep with volume control flutes. Joke 3 toots merrily. While testimony dribbles on, you spot our old raven perched atop the judge's herring barrel. It seems to be looping a motivational speech, cawing 3 short notes followed by a flourish that sounds suspiciously like a rimshot. Perhaps the bird aspires to late-night comedy. You feed it a crumb of rye bread. In gratitude, it drops a fragment of shiny obsidian into your palm. Nice, free volcanic bling to match your feather. The fisherman calls his expert witness, a self-proclaimed acoustic savant who demonstrates sheep-generated sound waves by striking a stretched fish skin drum. The court winces. The sheep nearest the stand respond with a single synchronized bleat, as if critiquing his technique. Fringe tidbit bonus. One 12th century herbal manual suggests calming sheep with valerian root mixed into their fodder, claiming it quiets the throat and smooths the wool. Historians still argue whether that recipe was aimed at reducing noise pollution or simply creating more cuddly sweaters. Mid-case, a runner announces fresh bread emerging from a nearby hot spring pit. The scent wafts across the field, earthy, yeasty, faintly eggy from sulfur. Proceedings pause, even justice bows to carbs. You trot over, snag a warm loaf wrapped in moss to protect tender fingers, and bite down. The crust crunches like snow underfoot. The crumb steams cheek flushingly soft. You savor it, recalling yesterday's musing about geothermal sourdough. Turns out history tastes phenomenal. Re-energized. You return as the judges deliberate. 2 favor dismissing the complaint. 1 suggests relocating the sheep. The 4th proposes installing woven grass screens as acoustic dampeners. That last idea sparks spirited sidebar chatter. Could screens double as windbreaks? Or maybe message boards for lost mittens? Scholars 6 centuries later will pore over marginalia describing sound fences. And historians still argue whether those notes reflect serious experimentation or scribes doodling after inhaling too much puff and smoke. Verdict time. The court rules the sheep may remain but must be tethered 30 paces from the river during fishing hours. Compensation: 1 smoked salmon per market day, payable to the fisherman's household. Everybody nods, pleased. The barter economy lives another victorious minute. You grin, picturing future historians coding salmon-based GDP graphs. With legal business adjourned, the valley eases into leisure. A troupe of skalds stages a dramatic retelling of yesterday's reenactment, this time casting humans as cairns and the ram as a heroic liberator. The actor playing fence-finder wears a shaggy cloak sprinkled with quartz chips to evoke nocturnal sparkle, clearly angling for award season. You laugh from the sidelines, then notice the raven stationed at your elbow, as if campaigning for best supporting bird. It caws once, demanding royalties, perhaps. Afternoon light grows buttery, slipping over tectonic ridges and dripping into crevices where steam sighs upward in delicate ribbons. You wander toward those rifts and drop your new obsidian shard into the geothermal wishing crack, watching it vanish in a puff of vapor and possibility. Somewhere beneath, magma shifts lazily, stoking the island like a cosmic hearth. Perfect imagery for tonight's eventual drift to sleep. A sudden shout draws your eye. Volunteers planting the first willow stakes cheer as green twigs take root in the damp soil. You notice they've arranged the saplings in gentle curves rather than straight lines, accommodating the natural slope of the valley. Practical and aesthetic, medieval landscape architecture flexing on future park designers. Mainstream historical note sneaks in. Icelandic law encouraged cooperative labor, or dugnar, wherein neighboring households shared tools and manpower for large projects, recording hours worked rather than wages. Think socialist barn raising with bonus sheep. You offer to haul a bucket of water from the river. On the walk back, ripples glitter like scattered coin. For fun, you test the old superstition, flipping a pebble onto the surface. It lands flat, sinks silently. No legal guarantees today, but the splash pattern looks remarkably like a tiny ram. Perhaps an omen or merely your imagination milking overtime as shadows lengthen, campfire circles rekindle. Someone passes a wooden bowl of blueberry skyr, sweet and tangy, dyed violet like twilight. You dip a carved spoon and taste summer in one creamy sigh. Nearby, the puffin-feathered mediator tunes a bone flute, coaxing lullaby notes that float over the blinking embers. The valley settles, guests shoulder-hugging cloaks, eyes shining with emberlight and fatigue. You recline against a smooth boulder warmed by sunlight stored all day, the stone now releasing its heat like a patient storyteller finishing the juicy part. The willow stakes rustle in the breeze, whispering promises of orderly pastures and calmer nights. Above, clouds fray into peach-colored threads, weaving an enormous blanket across the sky. You let your gaze follow that fabric, stitch by gentle stitch, until eyelids weigh more than obsidian. At the distance fence-finder's bells ring a final sleepy triad, answered by a hush of satisfied sheep. Somewhere a goat sneezes, someone laughs, and the raven issues one last approving caw before tucking its beak beneath a wing. You draw the cloak tight, feeling the day's stories. Legal drama, salty fish, willow fences, braid themselves into a soft rope, tugging you toward dreams. If you listen closely, the earth's slow tectonic heartbeat thumps beneath your spine, steady, ancient, soothing as a cradle rock. Gray morning mist curls above Thingvellir like steam escaping a giant teacup, luring you from dreams where willow fences won agricultural awards and fence-finder accepted the trophy with a dignified headbutt. You shrug off sleep, step outside the turf booth, and immediately taste drizzle, thin, icy droplets that feel as if clouds are sprinkling salt on the landscape to keep it fresh. A boy dashes past balancing 3 bowls of skyr. One slips, but he catches it with the flair of a juggler on his 3rd espresso. He winks at you and chirps, breakfast gymnastics, part of a balanced saga, joke one lands, yogurt intact. The Alting hums at low throttle this morning. Yesterday's quarter-court marathon wore even the ravens ragged. You cross damp grass toward the low rock and note that the willow stakes already show tiny buds. Life in this valley wastes no time. Neither, apparently, does dispute season. A messenger posts a slateboard notice, written with charcoal and more hope than legibility, announcing today's headline. Deliberations on outlawry. Mainstream historical fact tumbles into place. In medieval Iceland, severe offenders could be declared full outlaw, losing legal protection and property for 3 years or life. Outlawry sounded dramatic, but in an island society without prisons, it doubled as crowdsourced banishment, social distancing, Viking edition. You snag a spot on a mossy ridge, cloak tucked under you like a picnic blanket. A chill breeze tries to rearrange your raven feather into avant-garde hairstyles, but you pat it down, channeling runway composure. The judges, same pickled herring barrel quartet, arrive, rubbing hands together and muttering that their seats have fermented overnight. One judge produces a linen square scented with juniper, drapes it over his barrel and sighs, "Temporary upholstery." Joke 2 gets patted approval. Today's accused, a lanky trader named Svein Fishfingers, nickname earned for hawking dried cod so relentlessly his hands reek year-round, stands before the rock. Charges: forging silver weights, short-changing buyers, and allegedly teaching gulls to steal shiny coins. He denies the last part, though the gull circling above him with a coin in its beak isn't helping. The mediator asks for witnesses. Fencefinder, disappointingly, cannot testify. He is busy headbutting a willow stake for quality control. Fringe tidbit sachets in. Some merchants supposedly flavored inferior silver bars with a dab of whale oil so they smelled convincingly oceanic, hoping buyers would associate the scent with honest seafaring trade. Historians still argue whether this olfactory marketing ploy fooled anyone or merely fed local dogs' curiosity. You wrinkle your nose, imagining commerce as a medieval perfume counter. May I interest you in ode to questionable coinage? Proceedings pause when the law speaker requests the scale used in the alleged fraud. The instrument is produced, bronze, slightly lopsided, and bearing a crude engraving of 2 goats dancing a reel. You can't decide if it's counterfeit chic or goat-themed fan art. The law speaker mutters, "Balance looks drunk," then orders a quick test. They place 2 standard weights on either side. The beam tips, unhelpfully, toward a passing breeze, like a weather vane chasing gossip. Joke 3 sways gently. A collective sniff rises from the crowd as the drizzle thickens. You pull your cloak tighter and notice the raven huddled on a neighboring cairn, feathers fluffed into a black tennis ball. You share a crumb of last night's bread. The bird accepts, then promptly sneezes. Tiny, polite, avian a chew. You offer a sympathetic nod. Even Odin's messengers catch cold. The judges invite the trader's former clients to speak. A farmer describes paying for a bracelet that snapped like stale pasta. A seamstress displays thread she was promised was silk but turned out to be hardened herring gut. When she waves the specimen, the fishy scent slaps you in the face. You resolve never again to complain about modern malls. Another witness claims Svein's gull nearly knocked his hat off while extracting a coin. Svein insists the gull was rogue, acting of its own entrepreneurial spirit. You picture a gull in a tiny merchant's cap barking sales pitches. Bonus joke 4 flutters in unofficially.as testimony mounts. The mediator references law code passages about minting crimes. He taps the text with a walrus tooth pointer, remarking that penalties include hefty fines or full outlawry, depending on the gravity, and the judge's breakfast quality, some wags mutter. You remember the juniper-scented linen. Perhaps good upholstery could sway a verdict. Rain eases to a mist. Steam from distant hot springs drifts over, perfuming the air with spa-adjacent sulfur. You breathe deeply. Who needs scented candles when geology provides? The law speaker invites Svein's defense. Fishfingers launches into a saga-length explanation involving slippery docks, mislabeled cargo, and mischievous children swapping weight stones for river pebbles. He gestures so wildly droplets fling off his sleeves like confetti. One lands on the judge's nose. The judge blinks, unimpressed at mid-speech. Your favorite raven caws loudly, almost like a heckle, then flaps to the trader's shoulder and dumps the coin at his feet. Evidence from the sky, courtroom drama, Norse edition. The crowd gasps, then chuckles. Even the judges exchange, "Did that just happen?" Glances. Historians in later centuries will pore over saga footnotes describing the raven deposition. And historians still argue whether the bird was trained or simply enjoyed theatrical timing. Decision time. The judges confer, voices mingling with the hiss of damp grass. They return with verdict. Svein is sentenced to 3 years lesser outlawry, skaganger, exile from the district but allowed to keep enough supplies to survive. Compensation: 20 honest silver pieces paid to cheated clients, delivered via a neutral gua. Svein bows, relieved not to be declared full outlaw. The gull, apparently oblivious, steals a mitten and disappears into fog. The trader's departure sparks practical questions. Who escorts him to the border, and can he take his fish barrels? Volunteers step forward, keen for an escorted road trip. Free fish jerky, after all. You ponder joining. The scenery beyond Thingvellir promises glaciers and maybe a cameo by moonlight sheep. Yet curiosity roots you here. Tomorrow's docket hints at marriage settlements, and you've heard rumors of a dowry involving a carved narwhal tusk shaped like a dragon. Mustn't miss that. With formalities complete, the valley relaxes. A fiddler tunes up, playing a jig designed to dry damp spirits. Children dance, goats join, bells clanging in accidental harmony. You can't resist. Your boots stomp mud into rhythmic splashes, cape whirling. For a blissful minute, laws, drizzle, and fishy forgeries dissolve in motion and music. Later, panting pleasantly, you wander toward the willow fence line. Buds have unfurled translucent green leaves, impossibly fast. You brush a finger across one leaflet. It feels like silk done a study abroad semester in Iceland. Fence finder blinks at you from the other side, bell trio chiming lightly. He nudges the freshest twig, tests its spring, then, miraculously, decides not to jump. Progress. You reward him with a fistful of meadowgrass garnished with valerian root. Remember that herbal manual? The ram chews, eyelids drooping in content lull, living proof that botanical white noise works. Evening clouds gather, quilted and gray, but no storm threatens. The mediator strolls past, puff and feather pin now tucked safely under a rain hood. He thanks you for assisting morale. Apparently your clapping counts as public service points. Who knew? Joke 5 sneaks a bow. Campfires bloom again. Smoke threads rise, soft and straight in windless air. Someone ladles fermented shark cubes onto a plank near you. Fringe tidbit reprise. Hakarl, considered a delicacy partly because eating it proves your bravery or sinuses, was traditionally buried for months. Historians still argue whether the dish's origin was hardship cuisine or a deliberate dare that caught on. You try one cube. It tastes like ammonia flirting with regret, yet warms you weirdly from the inside. Victory. Twilight deepens into blue velvet. The law rock glimmers faintly with torchlight reflections, as if ancient words glow on its surface. You settle by a fire, knees hugged, listening to a skald compose fresh stanzas about ravens as impartial jurors. The tune drifts across the valley, mingling with far-off hoofbeats and the hiss of rain evaporating on embers. Your eyelids grow heavy. You surrender to iron-winged drowsiness, soothed by the knowledge that today the law held firm, the gull confessed, and willow buds promised greener tomorrows. The earth's magma heartbeat thrums beneath, warm as a blanket, ancient as memory, steady as the story still unfolding in your dreams. A pale slice of sun peels the horizon open just enough to reveal a bustle around the low rock, and instantly you remember why you resisted joining Svein Fishfingers's exile caravan. Today is the grand debate over a marriage settlement rumored to involve that narwhal tusk dragon. You stretch, shake yesterday's fermented shark aftertaste from your mouth, and head toward the commotion, boots squelching pleasantly through moss still drinking last night's drizzle. Somewhere behind you fencefinder jingles a chord progression in E-flat, as if to provide a personal theme song. Joke 1 twangs into the morning air. The bride-to-be, Gurren of the Eastern Fells, stands beside her father's booth, cloak trimmed with Arctic fox and eyes scanning the valley like a hawk evaluating real estate. Mainstream historical fact slides into your ear. Unlike many medieval societies, Icelandic women could inherit property outright and instigate divorce by moving their belongings to the threshold. Domestic mic drop, Viking edition. Gurren therefore approaches these negotiations with the quiet confidence of someone who can lawyer up just by rearranging furniture. You edge closer to inspect the famed dowry. There it is on a velvet-lined plank. a narwhal tusk painstakingly carved into a spiraling dragon, wings unfurling along the ivory, maw wide enough to serve as a tiny cup for celebratory mead. Sunlight kisses the ridges, making them shimmer like frost on a snow hare's whiskers. A skald whispers that whoever drinks from the dragon's mouth will speak only sweet truths for a day, which sounds useful until you remember how much of lore revolves around polite fibs. Fringe Tidbit arrives wearing a bow tie. Certain coastal families believed carving talismans from narwhal tusk, often called unicorn horn, protected unions from jealousy spirit sprites. Whether those sprites actually existed or simply represented nosy neighbors with too much free time, historians still argue whether talisman carving was mystical practice or savvy social insurance. The mediator, puff and feather pin glistening with raindrops, calls for silence. Both families assemble on either side of a woven reed carpet hastily rolled out to keep negotiation feet dry. You claim a lavarock seat nearby, king-sized compared to yesterday's moss cushion. The raven swoops overhead, having traded its obsidian deposit for a single bright blue berry, perhaps as a snack or a mood accessory. It lands on the carpet's fringe, head tilted like a court stenographer ready to record. Round 1. Bride's father requests 20 milk cows, a bronze kettle, and perpetual grazing rights along the southern creek. Groom's uncle counters with 10 cows of exceptional personality, a copper kettle, and a 3-year grazing lease. The crowd murmurs as if watching a tense board game playoff. You note guard dog economics rising again. Cows with personality presumably fetch premium rates. Joke 2 gives a sardonic moo. Before the next offer, the law speaker interjects with a mainstream fact cameo. Icelandic law required at least 6 witnesses to any marriage bargain, ensuring transparency and plenty of opportunities for bystanders to snag leftover snacks. That explains why the carpet's perimeter looks suspiciously like a picnic blanket zone. Free marital buffet incoming. Negotiations pause when a pot of birch sap porridge is delivered. Steam fogs your vision. The aroma is almost pancake adjacent, if pancakes had spent winter in a cedar chest. You scoop a taste, then cough politely as the heat boops your uvula. Gurin notices, chuckles, and passes you a dollop of skyr to cool the burn. An accidental meet-cute, perhaps. Too bad you left your own narwhal tusk dragon at home. Mid-porridge. The groom, Bjorn the middle height because Icelandic nicknames aim for brutal accuracy, produces a surprise sweetener, a driftwood love spoon carved with intertwining snakes, each forked tongue forming the prongs. According to fringe lore, lovers who share stew with the spoon will never disagree about soup thickness again. Historians still argue whether such utensils genuinely mediated culinary conflict or if couples simply felt too ridiculous brandishing a snake-tongued ladle to continue bickering. Uranus' eyes glint. She appreciates the artistry, yet her father clears his throat, clearly playing stone-faced accountant. He asks for inclusion of 3 fine wool cloaks dyed with rare woad. Bjorn counters by offering 2 cloaks and an annual barrel of lingonberry mead. That last addition triggers collective eyebrow lifts. Berries are scarce, mead sweeter than apology. The mediator's puff and feather quivers in approval. You glance left and notice fence finder near the new willow fence line, calmly munching leaves, not jumping, not plotting. Progress so monumental you suspect valerian grass has become his new vice. Joke 3 beams drowsily from the ram's half-lidded eyes. Back at the rug, tension peaks. A sudden gust flips edges of the woven mat, and for a heartbeat everyone grips valuables lest they blow into the ravine. The dragon tusk wobbles. You dart forward instinctively, steadying it with 2 hands. Its surface feels cool, ridged, and inexplicably soothing, like holding a frozen ripple of moonlight. The raven caws approval. You've just saved the statement piece from a gravity test. The mediator calls a recess so both parties can consult elders. As people disperse, you remain crouched, still lightly touching the tusk. A whisper of wind seems to curl within the dragon's hollow mouth, humming like distant seashell surge. Could be acoustics, could be magic, could be your skipped breakfast asking for seconds. Either way, goosebumps stipple your arms. During the break you wander to a nearby booth where an herbalist sells wedding anxiety sachets, stuffed with dill, lavender, and something she cryptically labels fairy patience. You inhale the pouch. The scent floats around your head like a comforting mumble. She offers you one in thanks for saving the tusk. You accept, tucking it next to your raven feather. Your cloak pocket is turning into a museum of weird and wonderful regathered on the rug. The elders deliver final terms. 15 cows of any personality, the bronze kettle plus copper ladle, 2 woad cloaks, and a yearly lingonberry mead barrel until the couple produces their first child or 10 years pass, whichever comes sooner. Everyone holds breath. Gurren nods curtly, Bjorn smiles, and the raven punctuates with a single triumphant squawk. Deal struck. Mainstream wrap-up. With settlement confirmed, the couple will marry at the next quarter court, property lines of both families recorded by chieftains, and celebratory feasting likely to last 3 days, though the cooks secretly hope it's 2. Fish supplies are running low after Svein's scandal. Ceremonial seal. Both sets of parents drink mead poured through the narwhal. Dragon. You watch honeyed liquid stream from its jaws, catching the sun so it looks like liquid amber cunningly disguised as justice. When each elder swallows, the crowd cheers. For one glorious moment, Thingvellir feels less like a courtroom and more like a festival that just legalized happiness as participants disperse. The skalds break into a ballad about love spoons fixing soup debates. The tune is jaunty enough that even the judges sway, pickled barrels rocking side to side like cheerful bobbing buoys. You step back, letting lyrics wash over you, heart buoyant, mind cataloging details for later dreams. Evening approaches with peach-colored clouds stretching lazy cat poses across the sky. Willow buds shimmer, bells chime softly, and somebody taps your shoulder to offer a sliver of lingonberry mead-soaked bread pudding. A preview of wedding desserts to come. You take a bite. Sweetness blooms, tartness follows, and suddenly you can't imagine drifting to sleep without this taste lodged gently on your tongue. You wander toward your booth, feet barely whispering against moss, and past the raven perched on a fence stake. It ruffles feathers and, without fanfare, drops the blueberry into your palm before winging off toward the glaciers. Gift accepted, mystery pending. You tuck the berry beside the lavender sachet and feel their combined scent swirl, earthy and bright. The valley settles again. Embers glow, songs fade to murmurs, and the distant hiss of hot springs underpins everything like a slow drumbeat. You lie beneath your turf roof, listening to willow leaves rustle lullabies, while the dragon tusk's quiet magic trickles through the evening air, smoothing thoughts like water polishes stone. Somewhere beyond the booths, fence finder sighs a drowsy bleat, and the earth's steady magma heartbeat keeps time as you slip into velvety sleep, wallet full of sensory souvenirs and legal gossip, ready for tomorrow's next gentle revelation. A silvery drizzle hushes the valley at dawn, and you wake to the rhythmic ping of water droplets tapping your turf roof like a polite drummer testing for an encore. Rolling out of your blanket, you find your cloak perfumed with yesterday's lavender sachet and one slightly squished blueberry, the raven's gift now a smudge of mysterious dye on the fabric. You sniff. Fruity notes blended with sheep musk isn't the next fragrance craze, but you could bottle it as Althing chic. Joke one drips into place. Outside, mist swirls low, turning tents and booths into floating lanterns on a ghostly sea. You navigate by memory and bell sound. Fence finder's trio rings a sleepy chord to your right, guiding you toward breakfast. A kettle gurgles atop hot stones near the willow fence. Inside, oat porridge swirls with diced puffin eggs. You accept a wooden bowl and notice the cook stirring with Bjorn's snake-tongued spoon, clearly borrowed for premarital soup diplomacy practice. Mainstream historical fact floats by. Gatherings at the Althing weren't only for law. They doubled as national fairs where farmers, crafters, and poets swapped goods, news, and occasionally kitchen utensils without filling out 12 forms in triplicate. Today's docket doesn't start until mid-morning, so you wander the expanding marketplace. A smith has set up a portable forge that wheezes like an asthmatic dragon. Sparks leap, scattering firefly style across damp grass. He's demoing a new hinge design for sea chests, boasting it can survive 3 storms and a bored seal gnaw test. You nod appreciatively, pocketing the sales pitch for future trivia nights. Beyond the forge, a healer's booth draws a curious crowd. She brandishes a glass jar of neon green salve, claiming it cures everything from sheep hoof rot to marital sulks. Fringe Tidbit slides its quirky self forward. She swears the color comes from moss harvested under full moonlight, when chlorophyll sings at a higher frequency. Historians still argue whether moon-charged botany was real science, placebo chic, or just a clever way to persuade night owl apprentices to do the harvesting. Your raven companion appears overhead, banking through steam rising from a snack vendor's cauldron. It snatches a chunk of dried cod, loops a victory lap, and drops the fish squarely in your bowl of porridge. Congratulations! You now possess the medieval version of surf and turf breakfast. Joke 2 splashes in a sprinkle of cod flakes. Bell echoes roll across the lava plain, summoning everyone toward the low rock. Today's case, you've heard, involves naming rights to a newly discovered hot spring whose steam drifts lemony thanks to deposits of rare minerals. Both discoverers, one a sailor with an enviably nautical beard, the other a shepherdess who claims her lambs found the spot while playing hide-and-seek, want official bragging credit. You jog over, bowl in hand, spoon still entangled in cod. The law speaker, cloak free of gull feathers at last, calls for statements. The sailor proposes christening the spring Beard's Bath, citing his contribution of seaworthy exploration skills. The shepherdess counters with Lamb Lagoon, reminding everyone her flock now enjoys daily spa treatments, producing the valley's softest wool. Audible ahs ripple through the audience. Sailors rarely compete with fluffy marketing. Mainstream legal nugget enters. Icelandic custom allowed discoverers to claim land by erecting cairns and publicly announcing their find before witnesses. The tricky part here? Both parties swear they built cairns first. Witnesses are conveniently fuzzy on chronology because fog, sheep mischief, and, as one elder admits, too much lingonberry mead tasting. A judge orders a site inspection and asks volunteers to serve as impartial observers. You raise your hand, who turns down a field trip to a natural jacuzzi? Soon you're slogging through spongy moss toward a cliff rim where steam pillars curl skyward. The raven shadows the group, clearly intent on editorial oversight. Fence finder begins to follow, then stops at the willow fence, torn between curiosity and fresh leaves. Valerian-laced grass wins. Progress, again. Reaching the spring, you discover 2 cairns indeed. One stacked with seashells, the other capped by a lamb skull painted woad blue. The sailor strokes his beard triumphantly. The shepherdess adjusts her woolen hood with equal swagger. The judges confer, deciding to measure which cairn appears older by lichen growth. Lichen, the valley's natural timestamp. You crouch close, inspecting green flecks like a geological detective. Joke 3 whispers that you're basically CSI, cairn scene investigator. Yet the lichen proves near identical, forcing the court into philosophical territory. The mediator cites a clause saying if dual claims occur, the site may receive a compound name celebrating both parties. He suggests Beard and Lamb Spa, but the crowd groans, remarking it sounds like a questionable stew. Another proposal, Wool Whisk Spring, gets mild applause but prompts a muffled bleat of protest from a lamb hiding behind its shepherdess. Open scholarly debate emerges. Historians still argue whether these compound place names, recorded in sagas, reflect genuine compromise or later scribes' poetic flair trying to squeeze more kennings into already crowded manuscripts. Either way, today's dispute offers living testament to the challenge of co-branding in the age before graphic design software. Rain recommences, drumming gentle syncopation on your hood. The judges, looking like damp owls, finally craft a Solomonic ruling. The spring will bear 2 titles, Lamb's Lichen Bath during lambing season and Skipper's Steam, for the remainder of the year. Each discoverer gains rights to gather mineral salts on their designated months. A ledger to be carved on driftwood and displayed beside the spring. Both parties exhale visible relief. No one wanted to shepherd sheep off a sailor's beard-branded property. Back at Thingveller's heart, word of the compromise spreads faster than gossip about puff-and-whistle fashion. Vendors already plan dual-season brochures. You overhear a scald penning verses that rhyme lichen with Lee Keen. Artistic license be praised. You sip warm whey from a horn cup, watching mist curl along basalt walls like sheets being tucked around the valleys as afternoon wanes. The marketplace morphs into a carnival. A puppeteer stages a comedic retelling of Svein Fishfingers's trial, using herring heads as marionettes. Audience laughter proves cathartic, though a gull steals one herring mid-show, bringing realism full circle. Near the willow fence, children tie ribbons on budding branches, wishing knots meant to secure good weather for the upcoming wedding feast. You knot one too, hoping for mild skies and extra lingonberry pudding. Dusk paints the glaciers rose gold, a shade that makes you want to knit the horizon into a blanket. You stroll along the tectonic rift, feeling the ground's slow stretch beneath your soles. Constant yet imperceptible, like time massaging history. Mainstream scientific aside slips by. This valley sits between the North American and Eurasian plates, widening a hair each year. At this rate, your picnic spot could earn its own postal code in a few millennia. Evening fires flare. You share a bench-like boulder with the mediator, who pours you a sip of honeyed ale and admits today's naming settlement might inspire future trademark squabbles over glacier smoothies. You clink cups, toasting the eternal dance between law and marketing. Somewhere behind, the raven croons a low caw, either approval or a request for royalties. Night deepens. Steam from distant springs glows ghostly white under moonbeams. You recline on a padded fur, cloak tucked, hands warming around the ale cup. Voices fade into murmurs. Bells ring a lullaby triad, and willow leaves whisper tiny memoirs of the day. The narwhal dragon glitters faintly in a nearby booth, catching stray sparks from the forge, as though guarding tonight's dreams with ivory fire. Lids grow heavy. Inside your mind, the valley's scenes blend. Sheep in spa masks, bearded sailors pulling levers on naming rights, and ravens tossing cod into breakfast like avant-garde chefs. Soft laughter ghosts across your lips, then drifts away on the same breeze that carries sulfur-scented warmth from underground. You surrender to sleep, confident that by dawn some new gentle oddity will stir Thingvellir awake, and you'll be there, feather in cloak, porridge at the ready, to witness it all. Dawn creeps in wearing a cloak the color of watered-down coffee, and you surface from sleep feeling as though a gentle giant just finished kneading worries out of your shoulders. Outside, a low hum of anticipation hangs over Thingvellir. Today the Althing will tackle the annual sheep-shearing code, which sounds about as exciting as watching grass grow, except here grass sometimes grows on roofs and therefore qualifies as edgy architecture. Joke one snips through the chill air. You shuffle toward the bustle, cloak swaying. Raven feather now accompanied by the lavender pouch that keeps fluttering as if it wants its own saga. Near the willow fence, the newly obedient fence finder is surrounded by shearers brandishing bronze shears that gleam in the thin sunlight. One shearsmith runs a whetstone along the blades with theatrical flair. Sparks fly like tiny shooting stars before dawn fully wakes up. Mainstream historical fact settles beside you while you watch. Medieval Iceland scheduled community shearing days so that neighbors could share tools, gossip, and manpower, all while ensuring fleeces were graded fairly for upcoming trade voyages. This collective chore doubled as a soft-powered census. Sheep counted, people counted, everyone accounted for without a single clipboard in sight. The law speaker climbs a wooden crate. His pickled herring barrel friends finally demanded a day off and calls the assembly to order. He begins reciting last year's shearing statute, pausing only when a gust of steam slides over from skipper's steam, fogging his spectacles. Yes, he's upgraded from bone to horn-rimmed, clearly trending. He declares a proposal to fine any shepherd who leaves more than 3 comically unsheared patches on a single ewe, noting that lopsided fleece encourages trolls to braid mischief into the wool at night. You raise an eyebrow. Fringe Tidbit just strutted on stage wearing uneven palms. An audible chuckle ripples through the crowd. Joke too courtesy of the law speaker himself, yet several elders nod solemnly. After all, no one wants to wake up to a polka-dotted sheep sporting troll tassels. The mediator, puffin feather pin peeking from his cloak, records the suggestion with a straight face, quill scratching like a cricket on parchment. Next item. Revising penalties for shear and dash. The highly frowned-upon act of sneaking into another farmer's fold at night and trimming a prized ram for prank or profit. One gua argues that present fines, 2 ounces of silver or 3 handsome puppies, are insufficient deterrent, considering the current puppy inflation crisis we snickered about earlier. The raven overhead caused twice, maybe objecting on behalf of canine currency markets. Historians still argue whether such prank crimes were actually rampant or exaggerated by skalds thirsty for comic stanzas. Yet, records list at least 5 sagas where bald sheep appear as punchlines, so the threat feels bleedingly real. Joke 3 gambles across the low rug. Debate warms up faster than a hot spring loaf. One shepherd proposes branding guilty pranksters with a stylized sheep earmark on their mittens so everyone can spot sticky finger shears when winter comes. Another suggests community service. Offenders must untangle last season's sail ropes while singing lullabies to the village goats. You imagine a tone-deaf teenager crooning to unimpressed goats and nearly cough up a laugh. The law speaker calls for testimonies. Up steps Sigrid, the valley's undisputed queen of fleece quality. Her sheep look like living clouds freshly ironed. She claims unsheared patches cause matting, which in turn traps volcanic grit, resulting in wool that smells faintly of toasted gravel. You recall the new lemon-scented hot spring. Toasted gravel might pair nicely with citrus, but perhaps not in a blanket at mid-statement. A gust whips Sigrid's hood, revealing hair braided with woad blue ribbons, matching the lambskull cairn from yesterday. Visual callback appreciated. She brandishes a sample fleece, prompting oohs and ahs as if unveiling royal pastry. The sample glitters. Someone whispers she combed tiny shards of obsidian into the fibers for sparkle, maybe inspired by your own pocket rock gift from the Raven. Fashion Week, Iceland edition. Open floor for opposition. A lanky youth named Thorstein Halfclip, nickname earned last season, defends his creative shearing patterns as art. He flourishes sketches. A sheep sporting zigzag stripes, another with a checkerboard rump. He insists buyers in Dublin will pay extra for avant-garde fleece, claiming foreign merchants adore anything that looks unintentionally intentional. This sparks spirited murmurs. Historians still argue whether Viking Age export markets truly crave novelty patterns or if Thorstein is basically the medieval equivalent of a viral TikTok hairdresser dreaming big. The mediator suggests a compromise workshop where Sigrid teaches proper uniform shearing while Thorstein demonstrates stylistic flourishes that don't compromise warmth. A sign-up slate circulates. You jot your name under spectator with snacks. Joke 4 sneaks in as bonus fringe. No extra charged as consensus forms. Rain eases, and the valley fills with the soft rasp of blades meeting wool. You step aside to watch Fence Finder undergo his makeover. Shearers work swiftly, leaving the ram sporting a perfectly even coat, bells jangling approval. Remarkably, no one leaves whimsical polka dots. Progress again. While wool piles grow, traders weigh bales on freshly calibrated scales. No forged goat-engraved devices today. The bronze beam swings steady, and everyone exhales in collective trust. Someone even jokes that the scale finally stopped partying. Joke 5 rings out, though we've exceeded quota, like a sheepskin bonus track. Midday arrives with a cautious sunbeam slipping through clouds. Lunch is barley stew enriched with tiny cubes of mineral salt collected from lamb's lichen bath during its inaugural shepherdess month. Taste? Like earthy lightning kissed by lemon. You savor spoonfuls, using Bjorn's love spoon borrowed again because apparently that ladle is now community property until wedding day. At the stew line a scholarly monk, rare visitor with parchment ink stains on his fingertips, shares a theory that shearing chants synchronize heartbeats between human and sheep, reducing animal stress. Fringe yet fascinating. He hopes to measure pulse rates with a water clock rig. Historians still argue whether such proto-physiological experiments influenced later medical thought or just provided monks with rhythmic cardio sessions. Afternoon sessions shift from law to culture. A poetry duel. Two skalds take the lower rock like a tiny rap battle stage, trading alliterative verses comparing fleece to moonlight, to raven wings, to the first snow that dared wear icing. You clap so hard your lavender sachet bursts slightly, releasing a soothing puff. The raven swoops in, plucks a stray ribbon of sachet stuffing, and weaves it into its nest of cod flakes on a nearby ledge. Redecorating, evidently sunset creeps forward dressed in tangerine and rose. Freshly shorn sheep huddle under low awnings, looking hilariously slim after their woolen coats are bagged into neat cylinders. The valley floor now resembles a giant bakery cooling tray, each bale like a cinnamon roll of cloud. You breathe deep. Lanolin tang, wood smoke, distant sulfur, Thingveller's signature tri-perfumed at evening's final act. The law speaker ratifies the amended shearing code. No prank polka dots larger than a hen's egg. Offenders to braid goat beards as penance while reciting Sigrid's fleece care tips. Everyone signs off by touching the Thor's hammer amulet, which tonight glints reddish like embers, stamping the rule with mythic authority. You retire to your booth, cloak pocket bulging with token fleece, half a lemon salt sachet, and that persistent lavender scrap. Under the turf roof you arrange treasures like bedtime talismans. Raven feather, obsidian shard, berry stain, and new wool sample smelling faintly of toasted gravel. The earth's magma heartbeat hums under your spine while willow leaves outside rustle lullabies describing orderly coats and well-behaved trolls. Slowly, thoughts unravel into dreamy yarn. You picture Thorstein Halfclip hosting a runway show for sheep wearing checkerboard kilts, Sigrid judging from a gilded bale throne, and Fencefinder strutting finale with bells chiming the valley's own applause. Soft laughter floats out of you, mingling with distant bleats, until sleep slips its gentle shears through your awareness, trimming stray worries and leaving the warm, even fleece of rest. Soft dawn drizzle whispers against the turf above you, and a familiar metallic chime nudges your ears. Fencefinder has woken before the birds and decided to test drive his freshly trimmed bells. You sit up, cloak sliding off your shoulders in a lavender-scented puff, and realize the valley is already humming like a giant, wool-lined beehive. Today the Althing turns its attention to grazing rotations, an administrative lullaby for some, but pure theater for anyone who has watched two gore fight over which hill counts as moderately grassy. You slip on damp boots, tuck the raven feather behind your ear for luck, and step outside, greeted by steam drifting sideways from Skipper's Steam, now rebranded with a hand-carved sign that flips to Lamb's Lichen Bath, whenever the shepherdess remembers. Joke 1. A hot spring with a split personality is still warmer than your morning porridge. You weave through booths toward the low rock, noticing that yesterday's shearing left the entire valley looking like a snow globe shaken by a polite librarian. White tufts everywhere, yet neatly corralled. Volunteers rake straggling fleece into baskets destined for Sigrid's quality control station. She sits on a bale throne, obsidian-sparkled shawl draped like a VIP sash. Mainstream historical fact strolls by Icelandic wool became a crucial trade commodity, shipped to England and the continent in tight-pressed bales called vamel, which also served as de facto currency. You wonder if modern banks would accept direct deposit in freshly spun yarn. The gull perched above your head seems intrigued. The law speaker begins roll call by tapping his staff, a driftwood rod now sporting tiny bronze sheep charms as if he's collecting legal merit badges. He announces a proposal to divide summer pastures into rotating quadrants, each labeled by color: Blue Hill, Green Knoll, Red Ridge, and, because creativity stalled, Other Ridge. That last name elicits a ripple of laughter. Joke 2, courtesy of bureaucratic exhaustion. Opposition arises from Briggy, a stout farmer whose cloak is dyed a valiant sunset hue, possibly to intimidate geography. He claims Red Ridge has secret herbal patches that cure sheep flatulence. Breezy bellies make lighter wool, he insists. Fringe tidbit unfurls. Sailors on long voyages allegedly stuffed pillows with fleece shorn from low flatulence sheep, believing it held in fewer sea smells. Whether that placebo aired out cabins or just calmed nervous crews, historians still argue whether odor-optimized wool ever existed beyond proud shepherd bragging to verify Briggy's claim. The mediator proposes an inspection party. You're cue to tag along for fresh gossip and maybe a sample of mythical anti-fart foliage. You hike with a small contingent up Red Ridge, the ground squishing with ancient moss that releases peppery scent each step. Halfway up, the raven alights on a boulder, tilts its head, and utters a click that sounds almost like a skeptical hum. You toss it a crumb of oat bread. It ignores the crumb, steals your crumb holder spoon, and flutters ahead like a feathery tour guide to the ridge crest. You discover low shrubs dripping with tiny red berries and leaves shaped like curled tongues. A healer in the group kneels, crushes a leaf between fingers, and pronounces it wind-reducing willow herb. Feed this, you silence the rear trumpet, she says. Joke 3 erupts as Briggy beams the satisfied grin of a shepherd vindicated. Samples get bagged for study. You tuck one leaf beside the lavender sachet. If your cloak starts smelling like a herbal cocktail, so be it. Back at the low rock, testimony resumes. Sigrid counters that flatulence-free fleece weighs the same as regular fleece once cleaned, producing a chart drawn on sheepskin that looks suspiciously like doodles of happy clouds. A monk with ink-stained nails peers at the chart and strokes his chin, muttering something about control groups and fleece inflation, prompting puzzled looks. Historians still argue whether proto-scientific debates like this nudged Iceland toward its later reputation for meticulous record-keeping. Debate turns playful when Thorstein Halfclip waves a sample fleece dyed bright teal and suggests naming one quadrant neon knoll to attract foreign buyers with trendy branding. The law speaker rolls his eyes so hard you hear the swish of exasperated eyelashes but scribbles neon in the margin anyway. Somewhere behind, goats nibble abandoned sketches, accidentally inventing edible art critique. A compromise emerges. Blue Hill and Green Knoll keep their names. Red Ridge becomes Willowherb Rise to honor its medicinal flora, and Other Ridge grudgingly upgrades to Sky Sheen Slope, proposed by a skald who likes how the basalt glints after rain. Rotations will follow a 4-week cycle, chanted on market days so everyone can memorize the order. Implementation details? Each gua must place color-matched banners. Sigurd volunteers to weave them, Thorstein to design patterns, because who misses a chance for avant-garde sheep flag fashion? Rainlight fades and lunch arrives. Barley cakes drizzled with honey so thick it pulls the day's arguments together like syrup on pancakes. You eat seated beside the willow fence, listening to fence finder test the resonance of his bells against the new banners flapping in rehearsal. A private concert of woolly wind chimes. Afternoon segues into recreation. The poetry duel champion challenges all comers to a one-breath saga, recounting a heroic deed without inhaling. A burly sailor lasts 14 lines before wheezing. A child surprisingly hits 21, describing a goat rescuing a baby puffin from a mudslide. Everyone applauds, partly for the story, mostly for the lungs. You attempt 4 lines, choke on a rogue honey glob, and bow out gracefully. The raven croaks what might be laughter, dropping your spoon back. Slightly polished, perhaps as critique. Evening edges in with violet light pooling between lava plates. Volunteers raise the first banner, a deep indigo square for soon-to-be Blue Hill, on a spruce pole beside the low rock. As fabric lifts, it snaps once, sending a crisp echo that feels ceremonial, like the valley itself pledging order. Mainstream fact encore, banners and markers mattered. Lost livestock could cost a family its winter safety, so any mnemonic device, even color coding, boosted survival odds. You stroll toward Skipper's Steam/Lamb's Lichen Bath, where mineral vapor halos lanterns in soft orioles. The dual owners host a tasting. Spring water steeped with lemon moss and a dash of juniper. You sip, flavors bright as glacial dawn, and imagine cafes of the future trying to recreate this with overpriced foam. Joke 4 turns your inner barista green with envy. Night settles. Fires spark reflections off Narwhal Dragon ivory displayed in Guriness family booth, waiting for wedding day tomorrow. Its carved wings seem to shiver under torchlight, as if preparing to fly across dreamscapes. You pass, giving the tusk a reverent nod, then follow a path lit by whale oil lamps to your turf shelter. Inside, you arrange new souvenirs: willowherb leaf, reclaimed spoon, a scrap of indigo banner, plus the usual suspects: obsidian shard, raven feather, lavender sachet. You stretch out, back warmed by stored earth heat, while outside the newly raised banner whispers until wind falls quiet. Sheep bleat drowsy harmonies. Bells echo soft metallic lullabies as eyelids drift down. You picture tomorrow's wedding feast. Dragon cup mead, checkerboard shawls, possibly goats banging on borrowed herring barrels for percussion. The magma heartbeat under your spine keeps steady tempo, assuring you that in this valley law, love, and low flatulence sheep can coexist peacefully. A lullaby stronger than any chant. The last thing you hear is the ravens settling on the roof, feathers rustling like pages turning themselves to the next chapter of your ever-sleepy saga. You wake to a riot of sounds: lyres tuning, sheep rehearsing polite bass, and a distant clang you recognize as Thorstein Halfclip testing herring barrels for their suitability as wedding drums. That's right. Today Gurin and Bjorn the middle height tie the knot, and Thingvellir is determined to look like the inside of a celebratory pastry. You swing your cloak around your shoulders, lavender sachet releasing a puff that mixes with smoke from breakfast fires, and step outside to find the valley already frosted with ribbons in the 4 pasture colors. A goat trots by with a blue bow stuck to one horn, glancing at you as if to ask whether accessories are included in dowries. Joke 1 trots off with a jaunty bleat. Near the low rock, volunteers finish erecting an archway woven from willow branches and dyed fleece. Sigrid's handiwork, naturally, while Bjorn rehearses the ring hand ceremony, holding Gyrnus' palm as though it's a particularly fragile egg. Mainstream historical fact glides in. Icelandic weddings of this era required the couple to stand on an ox hide while witnesses recited set verses, symbolizing shared stewardship over livestock and land. Today's oxhide sports embroidered dragons to match the narwhal tusk cup, because once you start a theme you commit. You offer to fetch water from skipper's steam, now flipped back to lamb's lichen bath for the day, since lambs are apparently more romantic than sailors. The dual owners hand you 2 jugs, one carved with a bearded face, the other with a curly lamb, reminding you to draw equal measures so neither party can accuse the other of hydrological favoritism. As you trek across damp grass, the raven shadows overhead, occasionally performing what looks like quality control flyovers. On your return, you notice a group of women grinding dried willow herb into fine powder. One sprinkles it into a clay pot of melted sheep tallow, claiming the mixture keeps midges off wedding guests and lends fleece a subtle rose scent when applied after shearing. Fringe tidbit preens. Some saga fragments suggest brides dabbed willow herb balm on ram bells to ensure harmonious jingling, believing dissonant chimes foretold squabbling. Historians still argue whether that was a sincere ritual or just an early attempt at ambient wedding music. You pocket a pea-sized glob, figuring fence finder might appreciate rose-scented acoustics later. The mediator, puff and feather pin freshly fluffed, gathers everybody for the legal portion. He reminds attendees that marriages become official only after the bride's male relatives lead her from bench. A phrase sounding comedic until you see Gyrnus brothers literally lift a wooden bench and carry their sister toward the ox hide. Bjorn looks equal parts awestruck and terrified. You whisper encouragement that he probably won't drop the dragon goblet unless a troll photobombs. Joke 2 sparkles in their nervous laughter. Witnesses form a ring, 6 minimum by law, but today's circle swells to dozens, because nothing beats front row seats at a medieval reality show with free mead samples. The law speaker recites vows in a steady cadence that drifts across the lava plain like low thunder. Promises of joint property, mutual protection, and fair division of any future moonlight sheep herd. You note the callback. Apparently even fictional glowing ewes can earn prenuptial clauses. After the vows, it's goblet time. You step forward to hand Bjorn the narwhal dragon. The ivory feels warmer than yesterday, as if absorbing valley excitement. Bjorn fills it with berry honey mead. Gyrn drinks first, then he sips, and the crowd exhales a collective, ah. So synchronized you'd think they rehearsed. Somewhere a monk jots notes about communal breathing exercises. Cue the feast. Long trestle tables groan under platters of smoked puffin, willow herb-rubbed lamb, and barley cakes shaped into tiny sheep, Thorstein's artistic flair, proving edible checkerboards lost out to cuteness. You snag a cake and nearly feel guilty decapitating its frosting ears, but hunger triumphs mid-feast. A skald belts out a new verse praising Gyrnus' fox-trim cloak. Soft as dawn on seal-slick stone, fierce as mare in midnight storm. The line earns scattered applause and one startled neigh from a nearby horse who didn't like the comparison. Joke 3 trots off into the evening. The raven lands beside your plate, eyes the frosting sheep head, and politely head tilts. You break off a sugary tuft and offer it. The bird accepts, then hops onto the edge of the ox hide, pecking rhythmically as Bjorn and Gyrn begin their ceremonial first steps toward married life, literally walking the perimeter of the hide to symbolize partnership across seasons. The pecking sets a tempo that Thorstein picks up on barrel drums. Soon, guests clap along, turning the symbolic stroll into a low-key dance line. Mainstream fact encore. Wedding feasts sometimes lasted 3 days, but given current fish reserves the cooks have budgeted for one long night. To stretch rations, they introduce a tasting station of geothermal bread slathered with fermented shark aioli. Apparently even honeymooners need to prove bravery. You sample a bite. The ammonia zing nearly lifts your eyebrows off your forehead, but you swallow with dignity because all eyes seem to track reactions for sport as twilight paints glaciers in lavender and gold. The newly raised pasture banners catch wind, unfurling like gigantic sleepy eyelids. The indigo flag of Blue Hill snaps once, sending sheep scurrying playfully. Their bells jingle, and you remember your willow herb balm. You dab a bit on fence finder's central bell. The scent wafts up like floral steam, softening each clang into something resembling a lullaby. The ram seems pleased enough to pause and let children braid fresh ribbons through his fleece. Now stubble short but still parade-worthy, a hush falls when Bjorn presents Gurun with a gift. A leather-bound ledger in which she may record household accounts, saga quotes, or, should inspiration strike, her own legal commentary. He jokes that if she ever moves their furniture to the threshold, she'll at least leave footnotes. Laughter mingles with genuine respect. Everyone knows Gurun's sharp mind could slice cheese paper thin. Late evening deepens, fires roar higher, and you find yourself seated on a bale beside Sigrid, who hands you a spindle and tries teaching basic spinning. Your first effort resembles tangled kelp, but she assures you beginners often create abstract texture. Fringe tidbit slides out. Some say abstract textured yarn protected sailors from seasickness when knitted into wristbands, though historians still argue whether that was placebo or simply a polite excuse for wonky craftsmanship. Midnight nears, yet the sky refuses full darkness, settling instead for deep denim twilight. Musicians shift to slower melodies. Half the valley hums along through Mead's soft lips. You lean back against warm stone, watching sparks rise, each ember a miniature comet arching before fading. Tiny previews of tomorrow's memories. Gurun and Bjorn withdraw to a nearby booth draped in fresh fleece, accompanied by friends bearing bowls of honeyed milk and more soused barley cakes. Custom dictates they spend their first married night greeting well-wishers until dawn, a social marathon disguised as romance. You send them a silent toast, then stretch aching legs, feeling the day's laughter lingering in your ribs like pleasant soreness. Above, the raven circles once more before vanishing toward the dark silhouette of Willowherb Rise. You wonder if it's updating Odin on marital stats or simply craving post-dessert stargazing. Either way, moonlight settles on banners, tusk, and newlyweds alike, bathing everything in a silver exhale. You retreat to your shelter, add one empty frosting sheep wrapper to your growing curio collection, and nestle into blankets still holding the scent of willow and smoke. Outside, barrel drums slow to a heartbeat tempo. Bells chime half-lidded approval, and the magma rhythm beneath feels almost syncopated with your own pulse. You drift toward dreams filled with oxhide waltzes, dragons carved from ivory, and sheep in floral perfume. Somewhere beyond consciousness, you hear the law speaker murmuring tomorrow's agenda. Something about odd taxes on imported walrus mustaches. But that can wait. For now, Thingvellir sighs, cradling law and love in equal measure, rocking you gently past midnight into dawn's next promise. Morning tiptoes over Thingvellir like a sheep wearing felt slippers, and you surface from slumber with a head full of half-remembered barrel drum lullabies. Outside the turf booth, dew glitters on every blade of grass, turning the plain into a green field of tiny mirrors. You inhale, expecting the lingering perfume of willowherb balm, and instead catch something briny. Apparently the cooks are already boiling seaweed for breakfast broth, because after yesterday's wedding feast the pantry resembles a raided treasure chest. A goat sniffs your cloak pocket, hoping for leftover frosting sheep. You offer the empty wrapper, and it chews the parchment anyway, proving goats are the original zero-waste activists. Joke 1 bleats approval. You wander toward the low rock, boots squishing in celebratory confetti of trampled ribbons. It's audit day. The Alting reviews gifts exchanged at the wedding to ensure dowries and bride wealths are properly recorded. Mainstream historical fact strolls beside you. Icelandic law required witnesses to tally each major transfer of property within 3 sunrises of a marriage, preventing later squabbles over who promised which cow or slightly moody goat. The law speaker, eyes puffy from minimal sleep, climbs his crate once more, clutching a stylus and wax tablet like a man prepared to write the Iliad in bullet points. First on the ledger, the narwhal dragon goblet. It sits on a cushion near the rock, ivory shimmering with residual candlelight. The law speaker notes its existence, value, and curious ability to make everyone speak sweet truths, for at least the duration of mead breath. He adds a wry comment that the cup also holds exactly one legal measure known as a draft. Apparently accountants never sleep. Next he calls for disclosure of foreign curios. Bjorn's uncle steps forward with a velvet pouch and extracts 2 immense walrus whiskers, each as long as your forearm and curled at the tip like punctuation marks. He claims they are prized as mustache extensions in distant Kent and therefore count as high-value trade goods. Fringe tidbit twirls its handlebar. Some North Atlantic merchants allegedly wove walrus whiskers into ceremonial fans, believing they repelled evil breath. Historians still argue whether this was hygienic superstition or just a flex to show you could afford exotic facial hair. The law speaker sighs. He predicted walrus mustaches would rear their bristly heads. He references a proposed import tax to discourage hoarding of non-local follicles. You grin at the phrase and imagine a customs officer interrogating a tusked pinniped. "Declare your fibers, sir." Joke 2 twirls a tiny wax tip. A discussion erupts over tax rates. One gua suggests a levy equal to 3 goat cheese wheels per whisker, since goat cheese is easier to store than mustaches. Gurin, ledger now open in her hands, counters that a flat cheese rate ignores length and curl density. Fairness demands a sliding scale based on mustache flamboyance. The crowd chuckles, but the law speaker nods. Metric-based taxation is surprisingly progressive. Talk shifts to another wedding gift, a small chest of pumice stones from a southern volcano. The healer explains they can exfoliate sheep hooves, ensuring nimble footing on icy slopes. She demonstrates by smoothing a goat's horn. The goat seems indifferent, but its horn gleams like polished marble. You file that away under unexpected spa treatments. A raven shadow darts across the low rock. Your feathered companion lands atop the crate, caws, and drops a single blue glacial berry at the law speaker's feet. Its version of signing the attendance sheet. The law speaker raises an eyebrow but dutifully records 1, berry, provenance. Raven, value, inspirational snack. You suspect he'll tax birds next. With audits wrapped, the assembly turns to new business. How to maintain peace between visitors and Thingvelir's resident Arctic terns, whose sharp beaks have reportedly liberated several lunch pies. A sailor proposes building scarecrows shaped like bigger birds. Thorstein Halfclip offers to shear fleece into terrifying avian silhouettes. The mediator warns that if the scare sheep wander in fog, lawsuits will multiply faster than pies disappear. You picture a rogue woolen albatross haunting rifts at dawn. Joke 3 flaps into the agenda to cool tempers. The law speaker declares a mid-morning respite. You tag along with Gurin and Bjorn to Willowherb Rise, collecting fresh leaves for bomb refills. The married couple walk hand in hand, already bantering over ledger margins. She prefers tidy columns. He doodles longships in the corners. Love, you note, is a collaboration between spreadsheets and sketches. On the ridge, you notice the pasture banners flapping according to their 4-week rotation schedule. Blue Hill today. Shepherds guide flocks accordingly, shouting color cues like referees at a very woolly sports match. Mainstream legal footnote chimes. Rotating grazing limited soil exhaustion and equalized forage rights long before ecology textbooks existed. You offer to tie a loose banner knot. The fabric smells of indigo dye and yesterday's bonfire, a strangely comforting perfume. Clouds gather, brushing peaks with slate gray. A distant rumble hints at a storm, prompting the law speaker to hasten afternoon business. Confirming quarter court dates and, yes, finalizing that walrus whisker tax. As the first raindrops fall, he bangs his staff. Its bronze sheep charms clang like tiny cymbals, and announces a compromise. 1 cheese will per whisker, plus an additional spoonful of lingonberry jam for curls exceeding a handspan. No one knows how to enforce jam payments, but the novelty satisfies everyone. Fringe epilogue. A monk quietly predicts that in centuries to come, archaeologists will unearth crates of fossilized cheese beside immaculate mustaches and wonder about Icelandic economics. Historians still argue whether legislation framed in dairy ever outlasts the smell, but their debate will keep future symposiums lively. Rain intensifies. Vendors rush to secure bales under waxed cloths. You duck into a booth where Sigrid sells leftover abstract texture yarn for half price, claiming it knits into storm-resistant stocking caps. You buy a skein, partly for warmth, partly to support yesterday's spinning EGOB while late afternoon thunder rolls, echoing off lava walls as though giants drag furniture overhead. Campfires douse themselves in steamy hisses. People retreat to turf shelters, and communal storytelling commences. A skald launches into a tale about a brave farmer who wrestled lightning into submission using nothing but a damp fleece. Obvious fiction, but the crack outside lends drama. Inside your booth, candlelight flickers over your growing curio pile. Indigo scrap, pumice pebble, walrus mustache tax tablet sketch. You found a doodled copy, and the ever-faithful lavender pouch. You sip broth of seaweed and willow herb, surprisingly soothing, and listen to rain hammer the turf. The sound blends with deep earth rumbles, magma's lullaby slowed to half-tempo. Gurin sticks her head in, offering a slice of rye sweetened with leftover wedding honey. She smiles, visibly relieved yesterday's joy now has legal cement. You toast with broth, rain providing percussion. Beyond her shoulder you spot fence finder, cozy under an awning, 3 bells muffled by tiny fleece socks. Clearly someone applied troll braid prevention tactics. The ram's eyes droop, lulled by rain, new bells barely audible above the storm. Night falls quickly under thick clouds, darker than any previous evening. Yet inside the booth, stories glow. The healer recounts how moon-harvested moss once cured the sniffles of an entire fishing crew. The monk wonders aloud if moss frequency can be notated like chant. You, mid-yawn, imagine a choir of bioluminescent plants humming lullabies. Vision blurs into dream as candle gutters, and you let eyelids slide. Outside, thunder grumbles softer, like a belly filled with warm porridge. Rain gentles to a patient patter, tapping rhythm against the turf roof. The same measured beat as your heart, as the hidden tectonic plates, as the quiet, orderly registry of love gifts filed away under stone and wax. Somewhere the raven utters a final, drowsy croak, then tucks head beneath wing. Thingvellir sleeps, freshly audited, mustache tax compliant, ready for tomorrow's chores. You follow its lead, drifting under blankets of yarn and lavender, feeling time spin like a spindle, slow, steady, soothing, while the storm sings you deeper into rest. The storm tiptoes away before dawn, leaving Thingvellir washed clean and smelling of rain-polished basalt, wet sheep, and a faint whiff of melted cheese. Probably the walrus whisker levy settling its debt in aromatic interest. You crawl from your blanket, stretch until joints pop like small celebratory fireworks, and push open the turf flap. Mist coils above the valley in lazy spirals, and every surface glitters as though the sky spilled a jar of ground diamonds. Fencefinder stands nearby, 3 bell socks dangling soggy but intact. He shakes once, flinging droplets everywhere, then gives you a look clearly meaning, laundry day. Joke 1 rings out in damp soprano to today's agenda, murmured by the law speaker between yawns, concerns waste management. Medieval glamour at its peak. Mainstream historical fact drifts beside you. The Althing maintains specific rules for disposing of offal, ash, and yes way because even Vikings knew pollution could foul grazing land faster than a gossiping gull fouls your fresh cloak. Violators paid fines in silver or, more memorably, had to muck communal latrines for a moon cycle. Judging by the collective groan rippling through the booths, no one fancies that career pivot. You shuffle toward the low rock, boots squelching in mud now upgraded to mineral-rich spa clay. A smith's apprentice kneels nearby, molding puddle sludge into tiny ram figurines. Free souvenirs while supplies last. You pocket one, imagining a future shelf labeled Authentic Althing Mud Sheep, Limited Edition. Joke 2 squishes gently into place. The law speaker climbs his crate, staff charms still clanging, though one bronze sheep looks slightly bent, probably headbutted by celebratory goats last night. He begins reciting clauses on midden placement, voice echoing across lava walls. To keep things engaging, he punctuates dry text with dramatic shudders whenever he says rot, earning scattered laughs and at least one gagging sound from Thorstein Halfclip, whose breakfast apparently fought back. Enter Fringe Tidbit on tiptoe. A tattered saga fragment claims some households trained ravens to sort refuse, dropping shiny bits into one basket and edible scraps into another. Recycling avant la lettre. Historians still argue whether this avian sanitation corps actually existed or if poets simply liked the image of birds judging human leftovers. Your own raven, perched majestically on a cairn, cocks its head as if to say, could have happened. Pay me and I'll separate your snail shells from fish bones right now. First dispute. 2 neighboring booths accuse each other of dumping fish guts uphill so rainwater channeled the mess downhill, onto whichever booth was unlucky enough to sit lower that week. The mediator, Puff and Feather Pin looking increasingly bedraggled, asks for evidence. One farmer unfurls a seaweed-stained cloak, declares it Exhibit A in the Great Gut Slide. Joke 3 sloshes onto the docket.to resolve. The law speaker proposes designated waste trenches lined with turf and ash to neutralize odors. He notes ash's alkaline properties, as understood in a that looks less stinky sense, will tame the worst smells. A healer backs him up, adding that ash sprinkled in middens discourages flies, which she calls winged demons of sleepless nights. You silently thank the ash gods. Nothing ruins a bedtime saga like buzzing. Implementation requires volunteers, so you join a work crew armed with wooden shovels and enthusiasm only mildly dented by last night's mead. Together you dig parallel trenches along the rift's edge, steam rising as warm earth meets cool morning air. The raven supervises from a fence post, occasionally swooping down to snatch a shiny nail or two, clearly creating its own upcycle boutique. While digging, a monk shares experimental plans to pipe gray water through hollow driftwood, hoping to fertilize herb plots without flooding tents. He sketches channels in damp soil, humming a chant with every measurement. Open scholarly debate surfaces. Monks claim driftwood piping reduces contamination, while skeptics argue water will freeze in winter, turning camps into icy slip and slides. The discussion ends with polite agreement to test one small channel before the next frost, because empirical evidence outranks hypotheticals, unless trolls tamper with the results. Trenches finished, workers mark them with color-coded stakes left over from pasture banners. Recycling meets urban planning. Sigrid appears, praising the symmetrical lines as practically embroidery in dirt, then hands out small cakes flavored with last night's leftover honey to celebrate sanitary progress. The cakes crumble in your mouth like sunshine-soaked snow. Momentary heaven. Midday brings a break for inspections. The law speaker, trailed by Gore and a curious goat, tours the trenches, declaring them straight as Odin's spear and twice as useful. He sets fines for future dumping violations. 1 ounce of silver or a week stirring whey vats under the supervision of Svein Fishfingers, freshly returned from exile to fulfill community service. Everyone grimaces. Silver suddenly looks affordable. Toward afternoon, talk turns to composting innovation. Thorstein suggests layering fish guts with fleece scraps to create luxury fertilizer, claiming Dublin Gardens will pay top coin for Viking-branded mulch. Fringe tidbit twinkles. A Dublin Chronicle does mention sea sheep soil, sold at high prices, though historians still argue whether it was Icelandic import or local marketing spin. The mediator takes notes, eyebrow twitching at thoughts of export tariffs on scented dirt. Clouds part briefly, spotlighting Willowherb Rise where banners flutter like giant book pages. You hike there for fresh air, plucking a few willowherb blossoms as souvenirs. The petals taste faintly of pepper and honey. You chew thoughtfully, wondering if they'll calm any residual storm gloom. Fencefinder trots alongside, now bellsock-free and back to crystal chimes. You mentally schedule their weekly aroma bath. Rounding a bend, you meet Gurren scribbling in her ledger while Bjorn sketches oxen in the margins. They're inventorying household refuse streams, romantic in a date nerd way. She asks your opinion on whether goat droppings qualify as high nitrogen input. You reply that if ravens start charging consulting fees, she'll need a separate column. Laughter bubbles. Sunlight feels brighter for a moment. Late afternoon sessions reconvene for final ratification. The law speaker, citing collective knows happiness, enshrines turf and ash trenches as permanent. Violations will be judged quarterly, with fines converted to cheese if silver runs short. Cultural consensus that dairy never depreciates. Joke 4 bonus, melts smoothly like, well, cheese that Gavelstaff taps. A breeze carries scent of fresh rain mingled with faint sulfur and newly buried fish guts. Oddly pleasant, like the valley has exhaled stale worries. Vendors reopen stalls. One sells crabapple slices candied in honey. Another offers tiny carved rune tokens shaped like shovels, commemorating the sanitation victory. You purchase a token. Add it to your cloak pocket menagerie, now jangling like the world's quietest souvenir shop. Dusk slips in on soft sols. Fires ignite, smoke curling upward in clean lines devoid of old awful stench. You relax beside a pit where geothermal bread bakes. The healer sprinkles willow herb seeds nearby, predicting lush herbs by next assembly. Her optimism seeps into you like warm yeast. With stomach full of bread and brain pleasantly emptied of trench math, you wander toward your booth. A lullaby rises from somewhere. A child singing about ravens sorting rubbish, proof storytelling updates faster than law. You nestle under your turf roof, arranging new treasures. Mud sheep figurine, rune shovel, peppery blossoms pressed between pages of your notes. The lavender sachet settles like a quiet elder, still the strongest scent but now joined by cleaner air and faint earth warmth. Outside, bells jingle languid polyrhythms, ravens murmur inventory, and ash-filled trenches lie ready to swallow tomorrow's scraps without complaint. The magma heartbeat beneath you thumps in slow solidarity, a bass line under the valley's fresh symphony of cleanliness. Eyelids close. Dreams knead themselves from sweet bread, twinkling bronze charms, and a goat wearing a sanitation badge. Thingvellir, ever orderly, slides a soft blanket of mist over everything, sealing night with the aroma of promise and freshly turned earth. Daylight hums awake across Thingvellir, dripping golden threads onto banners that now mark odor-free pastures and equally fresh trenches. You push aside your turf flap, savoring air so clean it could star in its own laundry soap saga. In the hush you hear fence finders' bells chiming a jaunty scale, proof that even rams appreciate premium acoustics after yesterday's ash upgrade. You stretch, pockets clinking with shovel rune, mud sheep, and a peppery willow herb petal that somehow still smells like optimism. Over the din of waking animals rises a new sound. Dozens of quills scratching parchment in feverish unison. It is copyist day, when skalds, monks, and ambitious teenagers create handwritten duplicates of laws and stories to carry home. Mainstream historical fact strolls up in clear ink. Because vellum was scarce and pricey, Icelandic gatherings often hosted communal scriptoriums where scribes shared benches, ink, and gossip faster than modern chat threads. You wander toward the largest booth, now stripped of wool bales and repurposed into a pop-up copy hall. Inside, tables groan under stacks of stretched calfskin, horn ink pots, and borrowed raven feathers. Your avian friend negotiates royalties from the rafters with a series of imperious caws. One sleep-deprived copyist swears the bird demanded payment in candied crabapples, which you find plausible given yesterday's snack line. Joke one flutters into the margins. Today's legal focus. Establishing fair quotation rights for skalds who remix older verses. Apparently Thorstein Halfclip has penned a poem describing the sanitation trenches as worm-tongue ribbons in Earth's sweet scalp. A line suspiciously similar to an older verse about fjord canals. The original poet, a gray-haired woman named Aldous Inkbiter, demands attribution, or at least a slice of the honey cake royalties. The law speaker, eyes brighter after 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep, convenes a hearing right in the scriptorium so testimony can be written down the moment it exits a mouth. A liveblog centuries ahead of schedule that he opens with a recitation of the established rule. Any skald may quote up to 3 lines of another's work during a feast, provided they add as first sung by, before continuing. Thorstein protests that sanitation deserves verdant metaphor, not legal speed bumps. Fringe tidbit sidles in One Lost Saga claims early skalds occasionally shouted public domain before plagiarizing, hoping the audience laughter masked the theft. Historians still argue whether that was genuine legal strategy or simply 10th century stand-up comedy. You grab an empty seat beside Gurin, who's cataloging dowry footnotes while observing proceedings for fun. She whispers that if quoting rules tighten, trade in pre-approved verse scrolls will boom. Someone will monetize citations faster than walrus whiskers sprout tariffs. Joke 2 twirls its scholarly mustache. Evidence time. Aldous presents her original vellum. Faded, edged with scorch marks from a hearth mishap, but legible. Thorstein unfurls his fresh copy. Letterform spruced with doodles of worms wearing jaunty top hats. The crowd titters. Aldous scowls, accusing him of branding the theft. The law speaker sends parchments to the comparison bench, really just a plank balanced on 2 cheese barrels, to be evaluated by 3 impartial monks armed with magnifying shells. One monk hums every time he spots similar phrasing. Soon the room sounds like a hive of mildly critical bees. While judges deliberate, you explore the copy hall. A young scribe sells quill enhancers, owl feather caps that allegedly increase calligraphy flair. He claims they are spell-checked by moonlight. You grin. The raven overhead does not brand rivalry, perhaps. Nearby, a trader offers small jars of elk tear ink, said to shimmer in darkness. Fringe tidbit sequel. Legend says elk tears gathered at spring equinox allow hidden runes to glow under frostlight, though scholars debate if that's chemical luminescence or icy hallucination from fermented mare's milk. Whatever the cause, the jars sell out quickly, mostly to romantics writing secret midnight letters. A bell, borrowed from Fencefinder for official drama, rings, announcing verdict. The monks confirm Thorstein copied 2.5 lines verbatim and replaced a single adjective. Under current law, that's legal if attribution is clear. Thorstein's version omitted it. Consequence: he must add Aldis's name and gift her first rights to any wool banners bearing the quote. Aldis nods, satisfied. Thorstein bows, mumbling that he can't keep top-hatted worms off merchandise. Joke 3 slithers out wearing a monocle. The law speaker, seizing momentum, proposes a new guideline. Future skalds may quote freely in oral performance but must mark borrowed lines with a brief drum tap, cheap, portable, and audible even after mead third helpings. Open scholarly debate sparks. Some argue rhythm cues might confuse dancers. Others claim it will train audiences to recognize citation like Pavlov's goats. Historians will later argue whether drum tap references improved poetic honesty or merely inflated sales of herring barrels converted into drums. Copyist day continues at frantic pace. You volunteer to deliver fresh ink to distant tables, weaving between benches as scribes swap puns about bleeding quills. One slip of calfskin flutters to the floor. You retrieve it, spotting an early draft of Uranus ledger preface praising violin-thin cheese taxes and lavender-scented ram bells. Callbacks stacking like rune blocks. Outside, clouds gather in puffy ranks but retreat before staging another storm. Sunlight slices through, illuminating banners that now double as drying lines for inked pages. Sheets ripple, text shimmering. The valley looks like a library airing its thoughts. Mainstream fact encore. Communal drying racks prevented smudging in damp climates. Pages often carried faint whiffs of open air, embedding the scent of Thingvellir directly into future codices. Mid-afternoon, refreshments circulate. Bowls of cool skyr with peppered willow herb drizzle. You savor a spoonful. Taste buds dance somewhere between yogurt parfait and herbal tea. A scribe jokes that if citations tasted this good, he'd footnote every sneeze. Bonus laugh, no extra charge. An hour later, the raven flaps down. Drops one polished mud sheep figurine onto Aldis's desk, perhaps as PR outreach. She softens, offers the bird a candied crabapple slice. Peace achieved via sugar diplomacy. As sun tips toward glacier peaks. Copying winds down. Finished sheets stack neatly, tied with indigo ribbons once destined for pasture flags. Recycling karma at work again. Thorstein tests his new drum tap citation system by reciting a limerick about walrus mustache taxes. Each borrowed phrase gets a sharp barrel thump, sending goats into synchronized headbangs. The crowd roars, proof that law can be catchy when set to percussion. Evening arrives with a hush. The copy hall empties, leaving only faint parchment rustle and the dusty after-smell of ink. You help carry barrels back to the music circle, where they'll convert from drums to seats, multifunction like every object in Thingvellir. The law speaker thanks volunteers, voice warm as fresh sourdough, then retires to draft tomorrow's agenda. Rumored arguments over whether glowing moonlight sheep can be trademarked. You file that under cannot wait. You return to your booth under a violet sky, pockets heavier with an owl cap quill gifted by a grateful scribe. Arranging your keepsakes, feather, rune shovel, glowing ink sample. You notice the magma heartbeat below feels softer tonight, as if even the earth is reading over the valley's freshly copied pages in gentle approval. Bells tinkle a lullaby, drums fall silent, and willow leaves curl into nighttime commas. You slip beneath blankets, mind drifting through images of top-hatted worms, citation drumbeats, and ravens negotiating royalties. A breeze carries faint ink scent, iron, milk, and distant elk tears, tucking into your dreams like an editor ensuring every line breaks just right. Thingvellir exhales, story after story folding themselves into neat stacks, ready for morning's next chapter. You drift off, footnote-free, happily plagiarizing sleep itself. Morning tiptoes in wearing a silver shawl of fog, and you wake beneath your turf roof to the soft sensation that someone sprinkled moonlight on everything while you slept. Fence finder jingles outside, bells still rosy from their floral bath, as if auditioning for a lullaby orchestra. You yawn, pocket your lavender sachet, and follow the hush of curious whispers toward the low rock where today's headline glows brighter than fresh lava. Are moonlight sheep real, or just really good PR? Joke 1 flickers like a lantern as you imagine a sheep hiring a press agent. You take a seat on yesterday's cheese barrel, now officially repurposed as the Committee on Luminescent Livestock desk, and inhale the faint scent of birch bark tea drifting over the crowd. The law speaker, sporting a brand new cloak embroidered with tiny, reflective rune swirls, clears his throat. Mainstream historical fact tumbles out in a soothing baritone. Sagas from as early as the 12th century mention flocks that shone upon the night like embers of the sky. Reminders that medieval Iceland adored blending legal minutes with bedtime mythology. A shepherd named Olafur Mooneyes steps forward, cloak spattered with bioluminescent lichen like accidental constellations. He swears on 12 bells and a remarkably patient you that 3 nights ago, he saw a whole flock shimmering near the northern rift, bright enough to guide him home without a torch. The assembly ooze. You resist the urge to sell tickets, joke 2, but you keep it inside because commerce can wait until after the evidence. Fringe tidbit sidles in on soft hooves. Some natural philosophers claim the glow is nothing mystical at all but rather a colony of phosphorescent fungus hitchhiking in damp fleece. They call it wool witch fire. Historians still argue whether said fungus can survive Iceland's chill, or whether storytellers simply enjoyed handing sheep honorary halos. The law speaker invites both sides to debate, puff and feather mediator gleaming in the half-light like a comedic exclamation point. First witness. A gray-bearded herbalist who once tried brewing moon milk by steeping glowing moss in whey. She produced a clay flask. When she uncorks it, the liquid inside pulses faint green. The crowd gasps. Joke 3 surfaces when someone whispers, "Great! Now the drinks judge us in the dark." You note the law speaker's raised eyebrow. He's equal parts impressed and suspicious of beverage-based evidence. Next, Aldous Inkbiter, fresh from yesterday's citation victory, reads an early saga verse. Wolves dared not circle the wool that bore the night within itself. She claims poetic license doesn't glow in pasture grass. But Olafur counters by dragging a reluctant ewe onto the platform. The sheep, unimpressed, promptly relieves itself on a legal scroll, turning footnotes into foot floods. The mediator sighs. History's first luminous deposition just lost some dignity. The law speaker announces an experiment. After sunset, a volunteer team will accompany Olafur to the northern rift and verify the claim. You obviously volunteer partly for the adventure, partly because you think Moonlit Field Trip sounds like a bargain bin romance title. Gurren joins, ledger in hand to record observational data. Bjorn tags along carrying 2 horns of mead for scientific morale. The raven flutters overhead, possibly signing up as independent auditor. With daytime hours to spare, the Alting moves on to practicalities. If moonlight sheep exist, do they require special pasture fees for nighttime illumination? Thorstein Halfclip suggests a surcharge called a glow tax, payable in lumens or, failing that, in extra fleece for winter lantern wicks. Open scholarly debate sparks. Some argue there's precedent in a centuries-old harbor law charging ships with bright figureheads double docking fees because they distracted gulls. Historians still argue whether that statute was environmental policy or seafaring shade. Lunch arrives. Sourdough stuffed with warm goat cheese and sprinkled with powdered willow herb that glints vaguely under shade. You chew while imagining night markets hawking glow-in-the-dark sandwiches. Joke 4 twinkles on your taste buds. The healer warns too much luminous herb may encourage midnight sleepwalking poetry, which everyone secretly hopes to witness. Sun slides down. The inspection party gears up. You sling a pouch with birch bark tea, the owlcap quill for jotting evidence, and yesterday's owlcap still smelling of ink. You never know when inspiration pounces. The law speaker hands you a rune-carved lantern but leaves it unlit. Control variable, he insists, channeling his inner laboratory goat. Trail toward the rift hums beneath boots. Basalt plates glow faintly with after-rain sheen, reflecting a lilac sky fading fast. Fence finder follows until willow fences end, then halts, apparently having reached his nightly adventure quota. Ravens swoop above in loose formation, an airborne punctuation to the unfolding chapter. Twilight deepens, and suddenly you see it. Far ahead, a scatter of gentle pulses, not unlike embers in a hearth but moving, grazing shapes outlined in palest mint green. Olafur lets out a whoop. Gurren scribbles so furiously the quill squeaks. You tiptoe closer, heart pounding like a barrel drum citation tap. Up close you spot shaggy yews flecked with filamentous moss that truly glows. Each exhale from their nostrils sends a swirl of silver mist around their heads, transforming them into woolly lanterns. Bjorn's jaw drops. He nearly spills morale mead. You remember last night's mud sheep figurine and wish it shone half as brightly. For science, Gurren plucks a moss tuft, careful not to disturb the yew's dignity, and you tuck it into an empty crabapple jar. The glow persists. Fringe tidbit gets new mileage. The herbalist notes the fungus reacts to moisture and body heat, an accidental partnership between biology and bedtime stories. Historians will someday argue whether this field test finally proves saga accuracy or just adds a footnote reading glowing result. Yes, but technically fungus. Sudden sky movement. Northern lights unfurl above. Green ribbons meeting green sheep in a cosmic color match. Joke 5 swirls when Bjorn suggests charging the Aurora royalty for brand infringement. Everyone laughs, breath forming tiny clouds in the chilly air. Gurren announces observational success. Olafur practically levitates with pride, crowning a yew with an indigo ribbon for easy identification. The sheep fails to notice its new accessory, more interested in snacking on glacier-cooled grass. You sip celebratory mead, noting the warm gold of drink contrasts beautifully with the cool emerald glow. Medieval color theory at work. Back at Thingvellir, the law speaker awaits by torchlight. Your party presents moss sample, field notes, and a ribbon glowing you leading the parade like a woolly comet. The crowd erupts, half in wonder, half calculating how glow sheep might replace costly whale oil lamps. Legal minds churn, creative minds dream. The mediator proposes provisional guidelines. Shepherds with luminous flocks must stable them nightly near public paths to aid travelers. Any glow tax will be offset by reduced torch levies, ensuring fairness. Moonlight fleece marketed abroad must carry labels crediting Iceland's eco-friendliest fungus, pending final brand approval. The law speaker taps his staff, bronze sheep charms chiming an ethereal chord that seems to harmonize with the glowing. While nearby, compromise glitters brighter than any torch. Midnight creeps in softly. Campfires dim out of courtesy to sheep lanterns. The valley shimmers like a living constellation. You recline on warm basalt, lavender sachet under your nose, moss sample glowing faintly at your side, and listen to murmurs of thrilled debate winding down into sleepy awe. Somewhere in the half-dark, the raven caws a satisfied "told you so," then settles to preen under auroral drapery. Your eyelids flutter. Magma heartbeat thrums beneath, gentle as ever but now accented by distant, lamp-like bleats. Thingvellir, equal parts court and starfield, cradles you in a glow so soft the moon feels redundant. Breathing slows, thoughts fade, and you sink into dreams inked with green light and rune swirls. Citation drum tapping once more as the valley hums. All sources verified. Now rest. The morning light filters softly through pearly mist, and you wake to fence finder's bells chiming a jaunty scale with the distant squawk of an Arctic tern that clearly skipped vocal warm-ups. You stretch beneath the wool blanket, lavender sachet bumping your chin, its scent mingling with rain-washed moss and a faint whiff of leftover goat cheese. The valley's version of eau de cologne. Today's agenda promises a curious entanglement of law and art, settling once and for all who owns the right to spin sagas at Thingvellir and how to keep poetic plagiarism from snowballing into axe swinging. You amble toward the low rock, boots kissing damp grass, and join the hush of eager scribes arranging horn inkwells and sharing gossip faster than ravens trade shiny objects. The law speaker steps onto his crate, new cloak embroidered with reflective runes that wink whenever he moves, like punctuation marks determined to steal the show. Mainstream historical fact glides out on his first breath. Icelandic law formally recognized oral tradition, assigning Skald's privileges and liabilities to preserve legal codes and family histories through performance. Misquote a verse and you risk fines. Misplace an entire saga and goodbye social credit. A young Skald named Frosty Quicktongue steps forward, hair puffed like a startled puffin. He admits borrowing 2 lines from Aldous Inkbiter's famous Fjord Ode without drum tap citation, arguing he merely polished the vowels for clarity. Aldous, already brandishing yesterday's plagiarism ruling like a victory banner, counters with her parchment, finger-jabbing syllables as though poking holes in his excuses. Fringe tidbit elbow drops into the fray. A few saga fragments mention secret hand signals Skald supposedly flashed to teammates mid-recital, so transitions felt seamless. Historians still argue whether those gestures were authentic mnemonic aids or theatrical razzle-dazzle designed to keep drunk audiences awake. The mediator, puffin feather pin newly waterproofed with beeswax, invites testimony. A gray-beard witness claims Frosty once sprinkled made-up dragons into a genealogical saga just to keep the cousins spicy. You picture a medieval cease and desist scroll snarling, remove dragon or face dairy surcharge and chuckle. Joke 1 lands with a soft splat like skier on a plate. Law speaker proposes tightening the rule hammered out yesterday. Every borrowed line must be preceded by a single barrel drum tap so clear even half-asleep goats recognize it. The drummers cheer, paid per thump, they smell a revenue stream. Copyists grumble about rhythm disruptions, but Gurin notes in her ledger this audible footnote could become peer review for poetry. Open scholarly debate flares around whether audience immersion survives the tap or whether future listeners will Pavlov drool for snacks every time they hear percussion. Proceedings pause for breakfast, birch bark tea and warm oat cakes studded with last night's glowmoss crumbs, a culinary accident that now sells as Aurora granola. You bite in, tongue tingling faintly phosphorescent. Joke 2 twinkles as you imagine your breath glowing like a tiny lighthouse for lost midges. Workshops follow. Novice Skalds practice weaving fact and fancy without tying themselves in narrative knots. One instructor showcases mnemonic sheep carvings, each wooden U representing a saga segment. He swears sliding them along a rod helps recall plot points. Some call it genius pedagogy. Skeptics whisper clever merch table. Historians still debate whether carved sheep truly aided memory or just made storytellers look busy while inventing new rhymes. Midday sun slices fog and pours through scriptorium slats, illuminating parchment like backlit snow. You volunteer as citation marshal, standing beside a herring barrel drum and striking it whenever a speaker quotes another's line without attribution. The first rogue verse earns a satisfying boom that startles a gull into dropping a stolen pastry. Unexpected enforcement snack bonus. Joke 3 waddles and powdered sugar by late afternoon, compromise crystallizes. Borrow up to 3 lines with pre-tap citation. 4th line triggers a cheese wheel licensing fee payable to the original Skald. Any added dragons must be labeled allegorical at time of mention. Frosty bows, promising to keep his verse thievery under 3 lines unless dragons insist. Aldous accepts a symbolic silver buckle and 10 fresh glow cakes as damages, declaring peace in rhyming couplets. The crowd applauds. Your palm stings pleasantly from all that drumming. Sunset cloaks the valley in rose and tangerine. Newly copied saga pages hang from pasture banners to dry, text fluttering like a flock of paper geese preparing for migration. The raven swoops through, steals an S-shaped rune, then drops it back as if offering editorial feedback. Copyists decide the accidental smudge resembles a heroic serpent and keep it, proof that even bird pranks can become canon. Dinner is barley stew laced with willow herb petals that glow faintly under dusk. Bowls resemble warm meteor showers. Skalds test the fresh decree, tapping drums before every borrowed toast, resulting in a percussive clink and thump symphony that makes even fence-finders' bells harmonize in amusement. Night deepens. Torches kept low to allow moonlight sheep to light pathways like woolly lantern posts. You stroll toward your booth beneath their gentle mint-green halos, sack of curios jingling. Rune buckle gift from Aldous, miniature mnemonic sheep, and a crumbly Aurora oat cake for midnight nibbling. Settling under turf, you tuck the lavender sachet near your heart. Feel Earth's magma heartbeat humming beneath, and let eyelids drift. Outside, a last drum tap echoes. A whispered period at the end of the day's story, followed by soft ba applause and the rustle of pages drying in starlit breeze. Thingvellir exhales, Saga's safe, Skald's satisfied, and you slip into dreams where every Glomos syllable is footnoted by the sky itself. The dawn slides into Thingvellir like a parchment unfurling, sunlight gilding each blade of dew, slick grass until the whole valley looks freshly inked for a brand new saga. You rise, lavender sachet pressed to your chest, and hear Fencefinder shake his bells in a brisk major chord, as though warming up before the day's debate. Word has spread that today's docket concerns the Whispering Stones. Those odd basalt columns said to carry voices clear across the rift, and you're not missing a syllable. You trudge toward the low rock, boots making polite squelches in the moss, and find half the assembly already huddled around a semicircle of dark boulders. The law speaker, ever the fashion innovator, sports a cloak stitched with silver spirals that flash like tiny northern lights whenever he gestures. He climbs his crate and announces the inquiry. Can these stones be drafted into official service as Thingvellir's first acoustic mail system? Mainstream historical fact drifts across the hush. Settlers long ago noticed that sound ricochets strangely in this valley, thanks to lava walls that form a natural amphitheater. Bards sometimes whispered lines into one rock only to have the verse pop out, intact and dramatic, 50 paces away. Handy when you want to recite poetry without leaving your porridge. Tio demonstrate. A freckled boy murmurs. Breakfast is burning. Into the nearest stone. 2 heartbeats later, the warning emerges from a second boulder beside a startled cook, who yelps and sprints off toward his cauldron. Joke 1 lands sizzling hot. Next up is Olaf Sharpear, a spinner renowned for hearing fleas sneeze. She argues the stones could relay urgent legal updates to far booths, sparing runners drenched in either sweat or rain. She cups her hands, whispers yesterday's sanitation fines into the rock, and sure enough the figures echo out beyond the willow fence where a group of shepherds groan in recognition. Fringe tidbit sidles in. Some sagas claim the stones occasionally repeat phrases on their own at dusk, as if ancestors were fact-checking the living. Historians still argue whether that is acoustic resonance, volcanic hum, or just grandparents refusing to retire. Sigrid the Fleece Queen offers a counterpoint. She says echo gossip will travel faster than lice on a lamb, and soon someone will mishear 3 cheese tacks as free cheese snacks, sparking dairy riots. The mediator, puff and feather pin gleaming beneath the sun, nods gravely. No one wants a stampede toward the goat pens. Tio keep the meeting lively. Thorstein Halfclip produces a palm-sized clay tablet etched with rune shortcuts. LOL, by the way, and an experimental send hugs pictograph, claiming the stones can double as medieval text-to-speech devices. He whispers LOL into a boulder. It booms back, laughing out loud. Please keep voices down. In the gruff tone of a disgruntled uncle, the crowd roars. Joke 2 ricochets with perfect acoustics. The law speaker calls for expert testimony. A traveling earthlore monk steps forward, citing experiments that prove basalt channels low-frequency waves better than sandstone, turning rocks into natural megaphones. He flashes a parchment graph that is basically a doodle of wavy lines but looks authoritative enough. Open scholarly debate flares. Another monk insists temperature, not rock type, controls the clarity, while a third claims humidity and cooperative spirit matter most. Historians still argue whether sober geology or sentimental folklore best explains why your cousin's voice can travel farther than your own. Lunch recess arrives. Vendors hawk oat cakes dusted with powdered willow herb that faintly glows, a leftover from the moonlight sheep spectacle. You bite into one, your molars illuminating like tiny lighthouses. A scald quips you've become the valley's first walking torch. Joke 3 beams right through the crumbs. During the break you test the stones yourself. You lean in and whisper, "Remember that mud sheep figurine?" A moment later your own voice answers from a rock behind you, adding, "It's still collectible." Evidently, even echoes appreciate merchandising opportunities. You grin, pocket the response, and vow to check resale values later. Afternoon session resumes with a practical proposal. Mark each whispering stone with a carved rune identifying its partner rock, creating a private channel system. Gurin, ledger open, suggests assigning each pair a fee schedule. 1 copper if the message is under 10 words, 2 if you start rhyming. Bjorn volunteers to carve the runes, already sketching stylish serif options. The raven circles overhead, eyeing the shiny chisel as potential payment for future consultation. But first, field tests. Volunteers spread out across the rift. You join a group on the far bank, breath frosting in cooler shade. The law speaker recites a draft law about regulating glowmoss exports. Seconds later, his words arrive crisp and clear, though someone mischievously adds with free shipping before the final syllable. Echo hacking, you note, will need penalties. The assembly reconvenes, buzzing like bees drunk on sour whey. In quick consensus, they approve the stones as official whisper posts, subject to 3 rules. 1. No secret messages plotting pranks involving half-shorn sheep. 2. Drum tap citations still required when echo quoting another scald. 3. After dark, priority goes to lost travelers and lovesick poets. In that order, the mediator bangs a tiny bell, another of Fencefinder's contributions, and the stones become infrastructure. Someone immediately whispers an order for 6 bowls of skyr to their booth. In less than a minute, a bewildered server jogs off, proving the system faster than courier goats. Twilight drapes the valley in satin purple. The new communication hubs throb with quiet murmurings. Trade inventories, bedtime lullabies, and one sheepish proposal of marriage that earns giggles from every direction. You sit against a warm basalt slab, lavender sachet exhaling soothing fragrance, and feel sound waves tickle your spine like gentle harp strings. Joke 4, why stop at 3? Pops into your mind. Imagine billing the stones a rental fee for all those voice real estate hours. You chuckle, then let the hum wash over you. Clouds part, revealing shy stars mirrored in a still pool near the rift. The pool catches stray whispers too, turning liquid surface into an eavesdropper's diary. But the words dissolve before any secret surface as night deepens. Torches dim to respect the moonlight, sheep meandering lantern-like along distant slopes. The law speaker strolls past, cloak runes sparkling, and thanks you for championing sonic diplomacy. You nod, eyelids heavy, and mull the day's lesson. In Thingvellir, even rocks gossip, provided you speak softly and pay your citation drum in cheese. You shuffle back to your booth, arrange today's haul. Glow oat cake stump, rune-marked pebble, receipt for 6 bowls of magically delivered skyr, then Nestle beneath blankets. Outside, echoes swirl like lazy fireflies, repeating fragments of sagas until they fade into true silence. Beneath you, the magma heartbeat keeps slow 4/4 time. You drift under that rhythm, carried by stone-born lullabies and the sure knowledge that tomorrow the valley will wake with even more to say, and the stones, ever patient, will be ready to listen. Dawn smudges pink over the basalt and you wake to a chorus of overlapping whispers. Messages ricocheting from the newly christened whisper posts like excited starlings. You shuffle from your booth, cloak pockets rattling with rune pebbles and yesterday's glow oat crumbs, and head toward the stones where a small crowd already queues as if these rocks are the valley's first post office. Fencefinder jogs ahead, bells chiming a polite step lively motif. Joke 1 jingles itself awake. The law speaker presides from his crate, silver spiral cloak flashing Morse code sparks while he clocks the early traffic. He taps a stylus against his wax tablet and announces a trial of stone slots, hour-by-hour windows designed to keep messages from colliding mid-echo. Your appointed temporary slot monitor, mostly because you're standing closest and holding a cup of birch bark tea that makes you look responsible. Mainstream historical fact strolls in medieval thing gatherings, often scheduled public pleading times called malfasti so speakers didn't shout over each other. Today's stone slots mimic that order with geological flair. First up is a merchant desperate to confirm whether his crate of walrus whiskers cleared yesterday's cheese tariff. He whispers, waits, and beams when the far stone echoes cheese received. Whiskers legal, curl density noted. Transaction closed faster than a raven can filch pastry. In fact, that very raven swoops by, snatches the tea lid you just set on a rock, and flies off cawing victory. Joke 2 slurps the punchline. Between messages you test distance acoustics, pacing 50 paces to another stone and murmuring, reminder, breathe. Your own voice answers from behind, startling a goat who retaliates by headbutting a barrel drum. An unintended citation tap that prompts nearby scalds to salute. Fringe tidbit waltzes in One Half-Lost Saga claims these stones once recited entire genealogy lists on midwinter nights, unprompted, like volcanic karaoke. Historians still argue whether this was real or simply the valley mocking anyone who tried sleeping early. Slot 3 brings Sigrid, brandishing a parchment order for 50 indigo pasture banners. She whispers the specs. Must resist rain, trolls, and fashion fatigue. The partner stone relays back a price in silver and 2 glow cakes, then adds an unsolicited design suggestion. Consider sequins of polished fish scale. Sigrid tilts her head. You scribble "Echo has opinions" in your makeshift ledger. Open scholarly debate phrase ready. Scholars now wonder whether basalt merely carries voices or subtly edits them for style.by mid-morning a bottleneck forms. Thorstein Halfclip arrives with a 6-stanza love poem containing 3 attributed quotes, each requiring a drum tap. His first citation triggers a goat chorus, the second sends a sleeping dog into an existential howl, and his third overlaps with the merchant requesting updated curl density metrics. The stones echo a tangled mashup. My heart bleats like low flatulence fleece. Deliver 12 mustaches forthwith. Laughter ripples. Joke 3 ties the knot on the mix-up. The law speaker halts the chaos, proposes rune headers. Tiny carved pebbles inserted into a groove at the stone's base indicating who gets to speak next. Bjorn volunteers to carve headers, offering dragon shapes for love notes, goat shapes for commerce, and miniature cheese wheels for tax updates. You gather smooth pebbles, sorting them by color under the watchful eye of the raven who, having lost interest in tea lids, is now auditioning rocks for personal jewelry. While carving commences, Gurin conducts a sound range demo. She sets her ledger on one stone, leans close, and whispers a disclosure. We have exactly 7 glow cakes left. 50 paces away, a teenager lounging on a barrel recites the number out loud and sprints toward the bakery stall. Experiment proves both range and the urgent psychology of dessert. You note that citation drums may soon double as bakery buzzers. Lunch break rolls in on a gust smelling of fresh bread and the faint sulfur of skipper steam. Vendors offer echo rolls, soft buns stamped with tiny runes meant to hold edible fortunes. Yours reads, listen twice, speak once, nap always. Fortune cookies clearly understand Thingvellir priorities. You dip the roll into goat cheese dip spiked with willow herb. The tang lights your sinuses like mini auroras. After lunch, the new header system debuts. Merchant pebbles slide in first. The stone grumbles out tariffs. And all's smooth until a trickster swaps a dragon pebble for a cheese wheel. The stone dutifully broadcasts a flirty couplet about moonlight sheep to the tax clerk, who blushes bright tomato. Suspect sneaks off, but fence finder blocks his path. Bells clanging moral outrage. You reward the ram with a valerian grass tuft. Disciplinary committee notes, bellback justice, effective. Mid-afternoon clouds stack over the ridge, and a brisk wind scoops voices, creating phantom echoes outside the slots. Scribes fret about piracy. The mediator suggests night curfews when wind misbehaves. Mainstream meteorological cameo. Icelandic katabatic drafts can amplify or smother sound unpredictably. Nature's own editorial board. The law speaker drafts a clause. During high winds, messages must be sung in monotone chant to reduce stray syllable lift. Scalds protest creativicide. Compromise reached. Any chant may keep 1 decorative flourish per line to TO test. Aldous Inkbiter chants a wind-safe bulletin about tomorrow's dye workshop. Monotone except for a single soaring sky blue. Her lone flourish. Echo returns intact, and applause waves outward like gulls lifting from shore. Scholars still argue whether monotone chants are more memorable or if the brain simply files them under quirky weather hacks. Evening slides in with bronze light. Headers now line the groove like a toddler's toy parade. Cheese, goat, dragon, tiny raven. Guess who insisted? Whisper traffic flows orderly. Your monitor duties easing into a rhythm. Listen, slide pebble, nod, sip birch bark tea from lidless cup. The raven returns, drops your stolen lid at your feet along with a polished rune pebble etched with a feather symbol. Silent apology or licensing demand. You're unsure. Twilight sees the last slot claimed by the healer, who whispers a lullaby into the stone. Sleep deep, valley heart. The partner rock cradles the words. releasing them gently over the encampment where lanterns dim and sheep glow faint jade. You feel the lullaby wrap the valley like a shawl. Even echoes yawn. You gather remaining header pebbles into a pouch, return them to the law speaker, and receive thanks in the form of one glow oat cake and a cheese wedge shaped like a rune. Pocketing your pay, you make for your booth. Along the way you pass the whisper posts humming softly, their grooved bases full of orderly pebbles awaiting dawn. It feels like watching stars queue for sunrise. Inside, you arrange new trinkets: feather rune pebble, fortune bun wrapper, and the rune cheese wedge, destined for midnight snack duty. The lavender sachet takes its throne atop the pile, scent mingling with birch bark and faint basalt warmth. You lie back, spine synced to the magma heartbeat below, while outside a last rogue echo drifts. Nap always? Whispered ironically by a stone that clearly supports your nightly agenda. You smile, eyes closing as fence finder's bells rustle one final gentle chord. An encore for a perfectly orchestrated day. Thingvalar exhales, rocks fall silent, and you drift, imagining tomorrow's innovations. Perhaps raven-delivered voice pebbles? For now the valley sleeps, conversation parked neatly in rune slots, leaving dreams plenty of quiet to roam. Sunrise puckers pale gold along the rift, and the first thing you notice, after registering the usual lavender sachet brushing your nose, is that the whisper posts are already murmuring good morning, like polite roosters with geology degrees. You rise, stretch, and discover the raven perched on your booth's lintel, holding a header pebble carved with a fish. Apparently, today's theme is seafood. The bird drops the stone into your palm, then steals a loose thread from your cloak. Payment complete. Joke 1. The Valley's loyalty program now accepts lint as you step into crisp air. You catch the smell of salt and kelp wafting up from the riverbank. The law speaker has called an emergency session about fish quotas, specifically whether overzealous netting is disturbing the trout that kindly fertilize riverside herb beds. Mainstream historical fact swims over. Medieval Iceland imposed seasonal fishing limits to protect spawning grounds, proving early lawmakers understood sustainability long before environmental hashtags existed. You join a procession of fishmongers, shepherds, and one disgruntled goat who clearly wants to file a noise complaint. At the low rock, the law speaker pairs his silver spiral cloak with a new brooch shaped like a leaping salmon. It's a polished obsidian bead you suspect came from your former pocket rock. He strikes his staff. The bronze sheep charms clack-clack in brisk tempo. First witness. Rainier Netmaster, smelling like brine and breakfast. He claims wandering sheep, wonder who, have been grazing too close to river shallows, muddying the water and scaring off fish. Fence finder, as if on cue, bleats from the willow fence, bells chiming an innocent chord. Rainier requests a buffer zone. Fringe tidbit surfaces. There's a local legend of river nannies, ancient spirits who swap fish for pebbles when water gets cloudy. Historians still argue whether those reports are metaphor, early ecology folklore, or disgruntled anglers inventing scapegoats. Gurin proposes mapping out fish siestas, midday hours when nets must rest and sheep stay inland. Bjorn sketches signboards with snoozing trout icons to mark the rules. Open scholarly debate phrase enters as Gurin notes. Historians still debate whether pictogram laws improve compliance or simply inspire artists. The law speaker nods, promising a trial run. Before votes, Thorstein Halfclip attempts comic relief, reciting a new verse. "Oh trout, please sprout legs, jog home in peace." Citation drum taps thrice. Everyone groans yet chuckles, unofficial joke too flopping like a slapstick salmon. Discussion stalls when Sigurd points out that reducing noon fishing will create a surplus of idle hands, and idle hands craft questionable fashion. She unveils scale mail, a tunic stitched with trout scales that glitter like icy sequins. She insists it's protective. Rainier says it's overfishing in disguise, and the goat just wants a snack. The mediator sighs, puff and feather drooping like a sad fin. To calm tensions. The healer proposes a festival, River Rest Day, combining net mending workshops, herb planting, and storytelling. You volunteer to help plan, partly because you fancy trout scale confetti. The law speaker approves a pilot festival tomorrow, pending logistics. Recess for lunch. steaming bowls of barley and chard soup sprinkled with dried cod flakes. You sit beneath a whisper post, politely inserting a goat header pebble, so you can relay a message to fence finder. Stay away from river until further notice. The stone answers. Bleat received. Negotiating with internal committee. You suspect that committee consists of the ram's appetite. Afternoon planning commences in a riverside clearing. You map the festival layout. Repairing nets near the north bend, herb plot south, and a storytelling circle at the center, ringed by glowing sheep to act as lanterns once dusk arrives. Bjorn sets carpenters carving trout signposts. Thorstein coordinates a drum troupe for rhythmic net patching music. Citation taps optional. While hammering stakes, you overhear monks debating whether fish scale armor deflects midges or attracts gulls. One monk posits a controlled trial with dummy mannequins. Another notes gulls have no respect for science. Joke 3 flies overhead, stealing your sandwich. Toward late afternoon, clouds gather, threatening drizzle. You test a prototype sign by the water. A trout curled on a pillow under stylish rune blankets, clearly sleeping. Passing shepherds snicker. Success. Meanwhile, the raven returns, dropping another fish pebble bearing a faint lichen glow. You add it to the sign as decorative moonstone. Branding achieved. S preparations wind down. The law speaker reconvenes assembly to ratify festival guidelines. 1. Nets must be pulled by sunrise tomorrow and remain on shore until sunset. 2. Sheep admitted riverside only with chaperone. Bells required, obviously. 3. Any scale mail garments must include at least 10% recycled pebbles to discourage overharvest. 4. Drum citation law continues. Even if tapping on herring barrels doubles as percussion for sea shanties, he punctuates each rule with a gentle staff tap. Bronze sheep charms now jingle harmonically with Thorstein's test drums, forming a quirky legal backbeat. Evening slips into lavender and teal. You meander back toward camp along river's edge, admiring trout flickers beneath clear water like living rune strokes. A silvery ripple catches moonlight, perhaps a river nanny at work, or just a fish wagging its tail at human fuss. Dinner is festival eve pie, essentially anything edible baked together under a crust shaped like a sleeping trout. Inside, carrots, leftover goat cheese, and a daring smear of glow moss paste that lights each slice with a soft chartreuse halo. You chew slowly, hoping your stomach now qualifies as a lantern. Back at your booth, you lay out tomorrow's toolkit. Spare header pebbles, signpost sketches, a coil of willow rope for sheep chaperoning. You tuck the glowing fish pebble beside lavender sachet. Their combined scent, ocean brine meets herb garden, refreshes the air. Magma heartbeat thrums steady, like a distant tide you can feel but never see as you drowse. Whispers drift from the stones. Fish siesta begins at dawn. Scale mail orders capped at 20 tunics. Remember to nap always. You smile at that last one. Fortune rolls never lie. Fence finder's bells answer softly from somewhere near Willow Fence. The ram clearly abiding by curfew. The raven rustles on your roof, perhaps composing next header emoji. You close your eyes, letting river hush carry you toward dreams where trout teach knitting patterns and stones audit bedtime stories. Tomorrow the valley will pause to let water breathe, and you'll be there, clipboard of fish emojis in hand, ready to help the river nap. For now, you follow its lead into silvery, fluid sleep. The morning sun peeks shyly over the horizon, painting trout scale shimmers on every puddle left by last night's dew. You tug your cloak tighter, lavender sachet nestled beneath your chin, and step into air that smells equal parts river mist and breakfast porridge. Fencefinder greets you with a triple bell trill that sounds suspiciously like a fanfare. You thank him for the free soundtrack and promise royalties in valerian grass later. Joke 1 rings out before your second yawn even finishes. Crowds drift toward the riverbank for the inaugural River Rest Day, the law speaker's latest blend of policy and picnic. He stands atop his crate, cloak now embroidered with fish scale sequins that wink whenever he breathes, and announces, from sunrise to sunset, nets nap, trout nap, and ideally we nap. Mainstream historical fact slides in on the next breath. Medieval Icelandic assemblies often declared seasonal fishing moratoriums to protect spawning grounds, intertwining conservation with communal feasting. Stalls bloom along the shore, Herb bundles here, willow-woven bait baskets there, and a table stacked with Bjorn's new pictogram signs showing a trout snoozing on a pillow. A goat eyes the display, clearly wondering if signs count as edible. Nearby, the mediator's puffin feather pin catches sunlight, flashing like a Morse code gull. He recites today's schedule: net mending workshops, riverbank herb planting, mid-afternoon story circle, and an evening feast of trout baked in wild thyme crust. Fringe tidbit swims by. Some sagas describe river nannies, shimmering spirits who swap cloudy water for clear if anglers leave an offering of bread soaked in whey. Historians still argue whether those tales encouraged responsible runoff practices or simply invented the world's laziest filtration system. You volunteer at the net mending station, where a Rainier netmaster demonstrates the figure-8 forgiveness knot that supposedly fixes both nets and friendships. He deadpants, "Mend the loop, mend the grudge," then hands you a frayed rope. You fumble, produce something resembling a pretzel, and Rainier chuckles, "Good, fish love snacks." Joke 2 splashes into the shallows. Across the way, Sigrid unveils her controversial scale mail tunic, trout scales stitched onto wool in iridescent chevrons. She models it under dappled sunlight. Half the crowd applauds, half squints, and one gull tries to land on her shoulder, mistaking the sparkle for a private buffet. The law speaker reminds everyone that festival rules cap scale garments at 20 per season. Sigrid counters that she's wearing exactly one garment, technically compliance. Open scholarly debate phrase pops up as he concedes. Scholars will later debate whether loopholes or loops of thread pose greater threats to order. Mid-morning, Gudrun leads the herb planting circle. You kneel beside her, pressing willow herb seedlings into rich mud while she explains their calming oils. Keeps sheep from over-philosophizing at 3 a.m. A nearby scald snorts, claiming philosophical sheep generate deeper wool. Joke 3 sprouts with the seedlings. Lunch arrives. Bowls of trout stew simmered with glacier salt and river mint. You blow on a spoonful. It glows faintly green where last night's moss crumbs snuck into the broth, turning each sip into a low-budget light show. A monk asks if bioluminescent soup requires a citation drum. You reply only if it starts quoting psalms. Afterward, scalds gather in a willow gazebo for the story circle. Thorstein Halfclip opens with a saga about a salmon that tricked a greedy chieftain by disguising itself as a silver coin. He taps a barrel each time he lifts a line from Aldous' archive. The drumbeats synced so smoothly a toddler dozes in rhythm. Rainier follows with a cautionary rhyme. Net too soon. Fish leave the lagoon. Crowd nods, then a goat sneezes louder than the barrel, earning applause for improvisation. Late afternoon brings the river rest ritual. Everyone places their unused nets on the bank, arranging them like giant lace doilies. You help drape the last one, noting how its damp fibers smell of sea, smoke, and a hint of goat cheese. Probably because the goat is still nibbling Sigrid's shoulder sequins when no one's looking as the sun leans west. Children float reed-woven lanterns downstream. Each bobbing light mirrors sky-gold ripples until the water looks like a molten manuscript of moving runes. You catch your reflection between lanterns, face smudged with mint and mud, looking almost scholarly if scholars wore trout print gloves. Evening feast time. Tables grown under thyme-crusted trout, barley cakes, and a daring side dish dubbed River Rock Surprise. Spoiler: hot stones have warmed goat cheese until it oozes like friendly lava. The law speaker offers a toast. To rivers that rest, laws that flow, and naps awaiting us all. Everyone drinks honey birch tea except the raven, who swoops down, steals a cake crumb, and drops a fish-carved header pebble into your cup. Payment in advance for tomorrow's gossip rights. Full darkness never quite arrives, but twilight paints glaciers violet. Glow sheep lanterns wander the perimeter, their minty halos flickering on the water's skin. You stroll to the low rock, sit with fence finder curled beside, bells muted by valerian garlands. Silhouetted against the aurora, Sigrid's scale mail finally finds its true purpose, reflecting green ribbons so dazzling that gulls circle in silent, reverent awe. The law speaker joins you, lowering himself onto a warm basalt slab. He murmurs a mainstream reminder. We're caretakers, not conquerors, even of stories. You nod, Hearing both river hush and distant magma heartbeats synchronize like two gentle drums under a lullaby, night deepens. Lanterns thin as they drift toward the lake, soft golden dots fading into silver. You pocket the fish header pebble, curl beneath your cloak, and let lavender mingle with thyme and damp stone. Last sounds. Raven wing beats, a sleepy goat burp, and the river whispering thank you in languages only pebbles fully understand. The valley exhales. Law, laughter, and lanterns settle onto quiet water, and you drift into dreams of fish wearing sequins while sighting Aldous with impeccable drum timing. The morning sun peeks shyly over the horizon, casting long shadows across the moss-slick lava where the low rock keeps sentinel watch. You tug your cloak tight, lavender sachet warm against your heart, and hear Fencefinder's 3 bells riff a jaunty detective theme, as if announcing today's legal whodunit. The rumor? Midnight mead mischief. A caper of vanished barrels and finger-pointing that promises more twists than an overbraided fleece. You pad across dew-damp grass toward the growing crowd. The law speaker, cloak now embroidered with tiny silver tankards, climbs his crate and clears his throat. Mainstream historical fact slides in on that first syllable. Icelandic law treated mead as coin. Stealing even a pint could earn outlawry or eye-watering fines, because fermented honey was winter sunshine in a cask. Einar Honeyhand, sticky-palmed brewer extraordinaire, steps forward and swears 6 prime barrels disappeared from communal storage just after midnight. Suspicion swirls toward the rowdy Fjord clan, famous for partying until ravens complain about the noise. Fringe tidbit bubbles up. A half-lost saga hints at secret mead-smuggling tunnels beneath Thingvellir, though historians still argue whether these were literal shafts or metaphorical shade at politicians who quietly rerouted taxes. The mediator, puff-and-feather pin gleaming, calls witnesses. Solveig Quickears recounts hearing muffled footsteps, a cork pop, and what she swears was someone humming the goat lullaby in D minor. You picture a cloaked figure tiptoeing with a barrel bigger than himself. Joke 1 rolls out like a loose bung plug. A search party fans across the storage hut. Volunteers pry lids, sniff staves, and joke that maybe the mead evaporated into liquid moonlight. One monk suggests spontaneous fermentation levitation. Another smacks him with a measuring rod. The law speaker orders a formal watch posted until dawn. You volunteer. Any excuse to stargaze and pet sleepy sheep. Night settles silvery and cool. You stake out beside the wooden hut. Lavender scent soothing nerves while Fencefinder curls nearby. Bells wrapped in lamb wool for stealth. The magma heartbeat beneath pulses slow drum taps beneath your spine. Overhead, the raven circles like a noir narrator, cawing chapter titles you hope are spoiler-free. Hours crawl. Then a shadow. Someone creeps to the hut, strains to lift a barrel but underestimates its heft and nearly topples backward. You spring up. Fencefinder jingles a muffled gotcha. The moon reveals. A teenage shepherd, cheeks pink, expression sheepish in every sense. In his arms, a half-empty cask and a wooden mug still dripping gold. Joke 2 whispers itself, caught red-hoofed and sticky-fingered to boot. Under torchlight the boy confesses. Last week he promised friends a secret coming-of-age toast. Just a sip. But one sip became 6 barrels, thanks to enthusiastic refills and questionable math. He vows restitution, 3 fresh barrels from the next brew, plus community service scrubbing whey vats. Historians still argue whether public shaming or hard labor reformed youthful tipplers faster. The law speaker opts for both, plus a formal apology sung at tomorrow's open mic saga night. You escort the culprit to Einar. Instead of rage, the brewer sighs in relieved exasperation, declaring, "Better honey lost than trust." He even offers lessons in fermentation safety once the vats sparkle again. Open scholarly debate phrase enters as Sigurd murmurs. Scholars will debate whether mentorship or punishment best secures future barrels. With mystery solved, the raven flutters down, taps the barrel with its beak like a judge's gavel, and drops a header pebble carved into a miniature mug at your feet. Payment for early morning entertainment. Joke 3 clinks approvingly. Dawn paints faint peach over glaciers. You lean against the low rock, eyelids heavy but spirit buoyant, as the mediator records the verdict. Thief to repay thrice the lost mead. plus 1 barrel donated to tomorrow's River Rest Feast, so no one sulks. Ongoing night watches staffed by volunteers, tea and lullabies provided. Crowd nods satisfied. Fence finders' bells chime a gentle victory chord. You inhale crisp air where lavender mingles with honey vapors rising from Einar's reopened casks. Somewhere beyond the willow fence, glow sheep blink out as dawn brightens, their night lights no longer needed. The valley exhales. Whispers fade, drums still, and you feel stories weave another tight stitch through Thingvelir's living tapestry. Slipping back toward your booth, you pocket the tiny pebble mug beside rune shovel, owlcap quill, and fish emoji stone. Evidence that even sleepy valleys run on caffeine-free drama. Under the turf roof you let blankets swallow you, heartbeat sinking once more with deep earth. Just before sleep claims you, an echo from the nearest whisper post drifts in. Nap always, barrels will wait. Advice taken. Dawn unfurls pale apricot over Thingvellir, and you blink awake to the sound of nothing. No bleats, no bells, not even the raven's morning editorial. The silent sheep must still be on stealth mode, which is admirable for covert ops but terrible for alarm clock duty. You stretch under the turf roof, lavender sachet pressing a comforting pulse beneath your collarbone. Then step outside where dew films every blade of grass like glass frosting. Fence finder waits by your door, head cocked, bells muted under last night's valerian wraps. He gives you a look that says, quite clearly, if the sheep don't speak up soon, I'm unionizing. Joke 1 jingles without a sound. The law speaker summons the bleary-eyed assembly with a double staff tap that echoes round the whisper posts. His cloak, silver charms swapped for matte obsidian so it doesn't spook the hush, shimmers in low light. He announces the morning agenda. Decide whether silent sheep violate existing livestock statutes that rely on audible proof of trespass. Mainstream historical fact trots in medieval Icelandic damage claims, bot, often required neighbors to witness an offending animal sound, the bleat, bark, or moo acting like a furry confession. No bleat, no blame. Today's stealth flock threatens that mechanism. Raffin Quietfoot, shepherd of the hush, steps forward in socks so thick they could winterize a glacier. He argues that silence prevents predator attention, reducing wolf incidents by at least 2 panics a month. Sigrid counters from her fleece queen throne that quiet sheep make roundup impossible. Last night 3 ewes blended into moonshine and she nearly hugged a boulder by mistake. Fringe Tidbit tiptoes in. A fragmentary monastic note claims some 12th century shepherds taught sheep to respond to laser-like clicks of tongue rather than bleats, the early prototype of a silent whistle. Historians still argue whether those monks were acoustic geniuses or just really tired of midnight boss serenades. The mediator lifts his puff and feather pin, freshly dyed charcoal to avoid glare, and proposes a field test. Attach echo beads to a subset of the flock. These tiny obsidian spheres, drilled through and strung on wool thread, clack softly only when the sheep take a full stride. That way the valley hears movement but still enjoys relative hush. You volunteer for bead duty, partly because you're curious whether fashion-conscious ewes will accessorize or revolt. While bead strings are prepared, monks unroll vellum diagrams of existing animal noise statutes. You notice a margin doodle of a goat wearing earmuffs, likely yesterday's scale mail gull artist branching out. The law speaker points to 1 clause and frowns. An animal that makes no report makes no trespass. Everyone agrees it needs amending before silent sheep turn Thingvellir into a thief's paradise. Workshop time. You, Gurin, and Bjorn kneel amid the flock slipping obsidian beads over ankle tufts. You sniff your hands, clearly judging bead weight-to-fuzz ratios. Fence finder observes like a quality control supervisor, bells still wrapped, though his tail flick suggests design notes. Joke 2 glints as 1 lamb swipes your bead string and trots off, ankles now sporting what looks like a volcanic charm bracelet. Midday sun melts fog, and with it the valley's quiet mystique. Bead clicks rise, soft but traceable, like distant knitting needles. Scalds test the auditory range. Thorstein half-clip crouches on a ridge, reports he hears modest applause from invisible sweater gremlins. Citation drum taps wants to attribute that metaphor to Aldous, who rolls her eyes but smiles. Back at the low rock, the law speaker records new language. Any livestock marked by audible ornament, bell, bead, or mutually agreed noise constitutes valid witness if its sound is heard inside claimant boundaries. Open scholarly debate phrase drifts in when a monk notes, historians still argue whether written definitions of sound can capture subjective volume. The law speaker shrugs. Future scribes can footnote decibels later. Lunch. Nettle herb flatbread drizzled with honey from Einar's rescued barrels. You sit beneath a whisper post, digesting the quiet but not too quiet clatter around you. The raven finally arrives, dropping a miniature bead onto your plate, then steals a nettle crumb. Payment cycles continue. You pocket the bead, collection growing heavier than your conscience after snoozing through last night's watch. Afternoon trial. The silent flock, now subtly clacky, grazes along the disputed boundary where Blue Hill meets Willowherb Rise. Hidden observers, including you, wait inside a line of shrubbery. Within minutes 2 use wander into Sigrid's herb strip. Their beads click against basalt. Sigrid's witness flag goes up, and mediators stride in to assess damages. 1 trampled dill sprout, compensation. Half a cheese wheel. System works. You log results on Guriness ledger, taking care to note, cheese fine paid in audible curds. With proof secured, the assembly approves the bead law. Shepherds are given a fortnight to bead tag any flock targeting open ranges. To aid compliance, Bjorn drafts a pictogram. 3 dots around a sheep leg meaning, must jingle. He nails copies to willow poles while children chant, clack clack, snack snack. Evidence that legal slogans can rhyme. Evening drapes slate blue over the valley. Aurora hints teasing the horizon. Skalds gather for open mic saga night. The teenage mead thief sings his apology ballad, voice shaky but on key. Every borrowed line gets a drum tap. Barrels resonate like distant thunder, and the crowd forgives halfway through verse 2 when his little sister joins on lute. Joke 3 strums as a goat tries to harmonize, producing a bleat so off-key Aldous declares it avant-garde. Supper is barley stew enriched with river mint and tiny cheese wheel fragments left over from earlier finds. Tastes like repentance and dairy. You sip birch bark tea, listening as fence finders' bells at last emerge from wool wraps, chiming a satisfied mezzo piano. The raven perches on a header groove, polishing the fishmug pebble with its beak. Clearly pleased the valley found order without muting all whimsy. You stroll to your booth under a sky now streaked neon green. Obsidian beads glint on distant sheep legs, mapping moving constellations across pasture darkness. You arrange today's souvenirs. Stray anklet bead, goat earplug doodle, half a nettle flatbread destined for midnight stomach grumbles. The lavender sachet dominates the scent hierarchy, but hints of honey, basalt dust, and mint weave through. You lie back, spine hugging the warm turf, magma heartbeat thrumming like a subterranean lullaby metronome. Outside, bead clicks echo softly. Quiet punctuation marks against the hush. Whisper posts trade gentle goodnights. 1 stone even teasing, clack responsibly. You exhale, eyelids settling, and drift toward dreams of silent sheep performing interpretive tap dance across the northern lights. Thingvellir, balanced once more between sound and silence, tucks you in with legal tenderness nobody would ever call loud. A blush-pink sunrise strokes the basalt, and you surface from sleep to the sound of bead clicks tracing lazy Morse code across Blue Hill, soft, like rain rehearsing. You stretch, lavender sachet bumping your chin, and find the raven perched on your windowsill tugging at a ribbon dyed in yesterday's nettle bath. It drops the scrap onto your blanket, 'cause fashion emergency, then flaps off toward the dyer's booth. Fence finder's bells answer with a syncopated jingle that clearly translates, wardrobe meeting at dawn. Joke 1 struts into the morning. Today the Alting debates color, specifically, whether newly discovered volcanic pigments should join the official dye registry. Mainstream historical fact sachets in. Medieval Iceland prized woad blues and lichen reds, yet travelers occasionally bragged of mineral yellows smelted from sulfur vents. Approving a new hue means updating trade tariffs, fashion bylaws, and, of course, poetry metaphors. The law speaker ascends his crate wearing a cloak stitched with blank rune outlines, an outfit awaiting whatever decision splashes across Thingvellir's palette. First to testify is Brynja Brighthands, dyer extraordinaire, who presents 3 wool swatches: Ember Gold, Geyser Green, and Sulfur Sunrise. The last one smells faintly like boiled eggs and bragging rights. She claims they're color-fast, weatherproof, and troll-resistant. Sigrid the Fleece Queen eyes the samples like a jeweler appraising gems. Thorstein Halfclip immediately sketches a checkerboard tunic idea. Fringe Tidbit pirouettes forward. A little-known saga fragment insists that clothes dyed with magma yellows glowed faintly under aurora light, handy for midnight sheep roundups. Historians still argue whether this luminescence was chemical reality or just a bard's exaggerated torch bill. The Mediator's Puff and Feather, now dipped in ember gold, notes potential hazards. Sulfur dyeing releases stinky vapors, meaning the valley could smell like giant eggs every market day. Open scholarly debate phrase floats up when a monk wonders aloud. Historians still debate whether public odor tolerance correlates with wool prices or with romantic patience. The law speaker jots that down, eyebrow twitching. Before discussion devolves into nose complaints, Gurin proposes a controlled trial. Dye 1 community banner in each color and monitor fade, odor, and gull interest over a fortnight. You volunteer as banner courier partly to spend more time near those smoky dye vats. Nothing says spa day like accidental sulfur inhalation. Joke 2 puffs sulfurious across your thoughts. While vats heat, copyists line up to document pigment recipes. Fauna brewers hover, hoping to infuse leftover sulfur solution into medicinal salves. Brynja shrugs. If they can sell it, why not? Meanwhile, Fencefinder positions himself as quality control inspector, sniffing each swatch with gourmet scrutiny. He approves Ember Gold, smells like warm hay, rejects Sulfur Sunrise, snorts, retreats. Bells jingle verdicts. The dyers take notes. Lunch break. Bowls of rye porridge sweetened with rivermint syrup. You sit beneath a whisper post, sipping slowly, when the raven returns lugging a fist-sized chunk of bright yellow rock. It thuds at your feet, rolls, and cracks open to reveal glittering crystals. Nature's advertising brochure. You wrap it in cloth, mentally tagging it Exhibit A for skeptics. Afternoon drills begin. You and Bjorn hoist the freshly dyed banners on spruce poles, planting Ember Gold near the law booths, Geyser Green beside River Walk, Sulfur Sunrise out by goat pens in case of smell emergencies. Scalds scurry behind, composing color-themed verses, citation drums tapping whenever someone borrows a line from yesterday's Nettle Odes. Wind picks up, snapping banners open like storybook pages. Ember Gold gleams warmly against basalt. Geyser Green melds with moss until it seems the hill is wearing a cape, and Sulfur Sunrise. Well, it radiates optimism and faint egg salad. Joke 3 wafts under your nose. You vow to invent a scratch and sniff rune warning. Toward evening, volunteers host a smell census. Citizens queue, sniff each banner, and vote. Data flows. Ember Gold loved by 82%. Geyser Green adored by poets but disliked by goats. Apparently reminds them of medicinal herbs. Sulfur Sunrise cherished by exactly 2 miners with lost smell sense. Gurin collates figures into tidy columns, while the law speaker mutters about olfactory quorum. Meanwhile, fringe phenomena escalate. Under lengthening twilight, your Ember Gold banner flickers faintly, as though storing sunlight and leaking it back. Children gasp. Monks hustle over with calibrated candles to test afterglow. Early readings suggest mild photoluminescence, likely from trace quartz in the pigment. Historians still argue whether such glow qualifies as miracle or marketing. The Mediator pencils a footnote, pending peer review under stars. Evening assembly convenes. Citizens line sandstone rows, faces painted by the soft shimmer of banner trials. You present Exhibit A, the cracked sulfur crystal, and describe its extraction from a nearby vent known as Dragon's Breath. Brynja explains safety measures. Vats outside, windward side smelting, respirators fashioned from fermented shark filters. Smell cancels smell? Apparently. The law speaker listens, then asks the crowd for final thoughts. Sigurd votes yes, color sells cloaks. Thorstein votes yes, checkerboard potential. A goat bleats no from the Sulfur Sunrise poll, persuasive yet non-voting. The raven caws thrice, possibly a tiebreaker. After brief whispering, the law speaker taps his staff. 1. Ember Gold and Geyser Green approved for trade. Point 2. Sulfur Sunrise relegated to experimental status pending odor mitigation. Point 3. All dying near geysers must include smell shields woven from willow herb and lavender. He thanks volunteers with mini nettle biscuits stamped EG or GG, mint fresh and crumbly. You pocket one of each souvenir snacks fit for your cloak museum. Night glides in shimmering teal. Glow sheep wander Blue Hill, their mint halos reflecting off ember gold like candlelight off brass. Your banner seems proud, fluttering softly as though rehearsing for textile stardom. Fence finder, bells free again, sidles up, sniffs the approved shades, chimes gentle approval, and nibbles a green corner. Textile QA never ends. Back at your booth, you lay treasures in a neat row. Sulfur crystal, smell census tally, biscuit duo, and tiny banner offcuts. Lavender sachet reigns but now shares aromatic space with faint mineral spice. Magma heartbeat pulses, steady and warm, echoing the day's theme. New colors can brighten history only if noses agree. Eyelids drift shut. Distant whisper posts gossip. Ember gold glows, green like geyser dream. Sunrise eggs on hold. You smile, sinking toward dreams where banners paint aurora stripes, goats critique palettes, and sulfur crystals hum lullabies that smell, miraculously, like fresh bread. Thingvellir sighs contently, beds you down in woven twilight, and the valley's wardrobe expands, one shade at a time. Dawn slips copper over the horizon, and you wake to an unfamiliar chorus. High, fluting notes rising from the willow fence like panpipes rehearsing. You poke your head outside the turf booth and see a cluster of bright green songbirds perched on fence finder's favorite fence post, each wearing a silk ribbon no wider than a shoelace. The raven, clearly disgruntled at the competition, flaps above them waving yesterday's nettle-dyed scrap like a protest flag. Joke 1 flutters along. Battle of the Bands, Avian Edition. You follow the melody to the low rock, where the law speaker, cloak freshly tinted ember gold, greets the gathering with a smile that threatens to melt glacier caps. Today, he announces, we debate migratory music rights. Turns out the songbirds, snow buntings on summer vacation, have been adopted by rival poets who want exclusive inspiration licenses. Mainstream historical fact trills forward. Medieval Icelandic courts did grant temporary monopolies, called SL, over certain natural resources like nesting eider ducks. Poets now argue that birdsong, like down feathers, is a harvestable asset. First claimant is Aldous Inkbiter, armed with a scroll of metaphors allegedly composed at dawn to those very chirps. Thorstein half-clip counters with a rune-inscribed flute he says co-composed with the birds, flutter tongue and all. The mediator's puffin feather flicks nervously. Clearly a détente is needed before quills become javelins. Q fringe tidbit hopping onto the perch. An obscure saga footnote claims early skalds offered birds tiny honeycakes to linger, thus commissioning specific melodies. Historians still argue whether these payments were genuine ornithological contracts or just bribery disguised as picnics. You glance at Bjorn, who already has a tray of oat crumbs ready, just in case. The law speaker proposes a listening test. Each poet must present a fresh verse right now, referencing the same birdsong. You're recruited as impartial drummer, single tap for every borrowed line. Aldous clears her throat and delivers. Feathered silver, hymn of molten snow, tap, tap. Thorstein counters with, ribbon-winged minstrels tune green mornings into drums of daylight. Tap, tap. Audience applauds politely. Fence-finder's bells jingle a third critique, perhaps favoring Thorstein by half a decibel. But which poet heard the song first? Enter Gurin with ledger evidence. Timestamps of dawn sightings showing Aldous at the fence 40 heartbeats before Thorstein appeared. Thorstein argues creative lightning can strike late. Aldous retorts lightning still needs a cloud's permit. Joke 2 crackles overhead. The law speaker, seeking compromise, unveils a prototype bird share schedule. Poets may reserve listening slots at the willow fence in half-hour increments, paying a modest fee of 2 lines of public domain verse per slot. In return, the birds receive daily honeycomb rations because fair wages even for sopranos. Open scholarly debate phrase flies in via a monk who muses. Historians will later debate whether monetizing birdsong elevated art or commodified serenity. The law speaker nods. Footnote accepted. Before voting, everyone attends a bird etiquette workshop led by a visiting naturalist from distant Orkney. She demonstrates polite feeder placement, warns that sudden applause startles feathers into silence, and hands out miniature silk scarves to decorate territorial perches. You tie one around a branch. The raven swoops in, steals it, and repurposes it as a necktie. Joke 3 clutches your ribs. Lunch break unfolds near skipper's steam/lamb's lichen bath. On the menu, trout skewers glazed with honey and sprinkled with crushed sulfur crystals, marketed as fire and ice fish. You nibble. The glaze fizzes like distant thunder against your tongue. A scald beside you claims the crackle turns the meal into percussion. You chew in 4/4 time. Back at the Low Rock, voting commences. The assembly largely favors birdshare, contingent on 3 clauses carved into basalt. 1. Song sessions limited to dawn and dusk so midday fleece shearing retains ambient quiet. Point 2. Poets must announce borrowed lines with a soft finger snap. Less jarring than drum taps but still audible. Point 3. Any bird bribed with honeycakes becomes, for licensing purposes, a co-author entitled to 1 ceremonial oat crumb royalty per performance. You etch these into the record while Thorstein gifts Aldous a ribbon carved from willow wood. Symbolic peace offering or subtle marketing, hard to tell. She accepts with a curt nod. The birds chirp what you interpret as an endorsement deal. Afternoon clouds gather like parchment smudges, prompting a shelter-building contest to house the birds during sudden squalls. Teams race to weave sapling arcs and turf roofs. Bjorn leads the engineering group, citing longship rib geometry for structural strength. You join the decor squad, stitching leftover geyser green cloth into rain guards. Fringe practical note. Some sagas say birdhouses painted woad blue deter hawks. Historians still argue if color matters or hawks simply dislike trendy real estate. A sprinkle hits, shelters hold, and birds slip inside chirping approval. The law speaker inspects each hut, awards first prize, a silver button, to Bjorn for nautical aesthetics. Your team gets honorable mention and a consolation cookie shaped like a treble clef. Acceptable carbs. Evening sun reappears low and amber. A mini concert unfolds. Birds trill, scalds recite, finger snaps punctuate references. You keep the raven occupied with raisins to prevent lyrical sabotage. Fence finder lounges nearby, bells blending with melody until the valley sounds like a lullaby woven from wool and wind. Dinner. Barley stew swirled with willow herb cream, served in bread bowls dyed faint ember gold. You carve out the center, watch soup glow softly, then realize you're eating tomorrow's art supplies. No matter, creativity tastes better than it looks. Across the table, a monk tests a glow-moss lamp and whispers, "We could publish nighttime illuminated manuscripts." You nod, already picturing lunalit parchments. Night drapes indigo silk over glaciers. Approved banners, ember gold and geyser green, shuffle softly in breeze, reflecting auroral arcs. Sulfur sunrise test strips still quarantined near goat pens. Even goats keep distance, proof of effective smell legislation. Birds nest in new shelters. Bead clicks from silent sheep map gentle metronomes across dark pastures. You wander back to your booth, pockets stuffed with consolation cookie, willow ribbon offcut, and a tiny flute Thorstein whittled for bird duets. Lavender sachet awaits, blending perfume with faint honey and sulfur notes, surprisingly soothing. You lie down, magma heartbeat against your spine, and a last echo drifts from whisper posts. Nap always. Tomorrow we draft rainbow tariffs. You smile, eyelids fluttering, drifting into dreams where songbirds invoice metaphors and goats critique chromatic scales. Thingvellir hums a soft lullaby, proof that even business meetings can sing when nature gets top billing. A lavender dawn seeps over Thingvellir like watered-down ink, and you wake to the whir of quills already scratching vellum. The raven sits on your turf roof, policing the sunrise while wearing yesterday's willow ribbon as a sash. Some birds dress before breakfast, apparently. Fence finder jingles an exuberant chord, having shed his Valerian socks in favor of a jaunty ember gold tassel. He seems determined to start today's meeting early, so you shuffle out from the booth, cloak flapping, lavender sachet puffing a quiet greeting. Joke 1 stretches its wings. Even the sachet smells ambitious this morning. Word has spread that the Althing will tackle rainbow tariffs, those customs fees meant to balance trade in newly approved dyes. Over by the low rock, the law speaker, cloak patched with experimental swatches like a walking paint card, bangs his staff for order. Mainstream historical fact slides into place with that tap. Iceland's medieval economy ran on VAML, standard wool cloth, weighed in ells. Introducing premium pigments always complicated exchange rates, because bright colors risked inflating value faster than actual thread count. Brynja Brighthands presents her ledger. Ember Gold commands 3 extra Ls per bolt, Geyser Green 2, Sulfur Sunrise still stalled at, "We'll pay you to take it away." Sigrid seconds the numbers but warns inflation could price smallholders out of tunic upgrades. A thrifty Gua proposes a dye duty payable in equal lengths of undyed cloth. 3 plain Ls offset 1 Ember Gold L. Fringe tidbit sachets forth. A half-forgotten saga references smugglers who shaved gold-dyed nap from cloaks, sold the scrap as pigment dust, then rewove the naked fabric and claimed it was always beige. Historians still argue whether that stunt was early arbitrage or just the textile version of watering Eliatio visualized tariff tears. Thorstein Halfclip unveils a giant color wheel painted on sheepskin. He spins it with flourish. Wherever it stops, the duty sets. Your raven lands on the wheel mid-spin, claw pointing to molten marigold. An unapproved yellow nobody asked for. Laughter ripples, joke 2 twirls with the wheel. The law speaker rightly suspects spinning wheels invite chaos, so Gurin proposes a more predictable scale. Tariffs pegged to solar angles. At dawn, cheapest. At noon, highest, because dyes look brightest. At dusk, mid-range compromise. Open scholarly debate phrase enters when a monk observes. Historians will later debate whether pricing by shadow length created fair commerce or meteorological madness. A recess lets stakeholders cool their pigment-fumed tempers. You wander toward Skipper's steam, catching whiffs of sulfur where Brynja's apprentices rinse wool. They hand you a sample of Aurora Violet, experimental hue coaxed from fermented crowberries and whispering stone minerals. A callback to yesterday's acoustic geology. The cloth faintly shimmers under steam. You tuck it into your pouch, already predicting tariff nightmares. Mid-morning hearings resume with a demonstration of color valuation. 2 traders place bolts on the scale. 1 ember gold, 1 undyed. The law speaker invites 3 goats, neutral judges by tradition, to sniff each bolt. All goats gravitate to ember gold, nibbling its hem appreciatively. Sigrid argues this proves market preference. Gurin counters that goats also like your laundry. Joke 3 butts heads politely to finalize percentages. The mediator unveils a tariff ladder. A tall frame strung with rungs of dyed yarn. Bottom rung plain, top rung glow moss neon. Each rung up costs another 1/2 L duty. You help knot yarn samples, noticing your new Aurora Violet sits third from top, just under Sulfur Sunrise, which still smells like an egg dared you to gag. Lunch arrives. Rivermint flatbread topped with pike roe the color of geyser green, edible lobbying at its finest. While you chew, a scald tests his latest couplet about enamel-hungry fish. Citation fingersnap flicks when he borrows Aldous' rippling rune of green. The raven steals a roe pearl, drops a pebble shaped like a tiny ladder on your plate. Payment accepted. Afternoon clouds tumble in, diffusing light into perfect dye-sampling haze. A second vote tally begins. Fender finder, now official gong ram, headbutts a bronze bowl for each eye. Bells, tassel, and bowl clatter in joyful cacophony that probably violates yesterday's quiet sheep claws, but earns forgiveness for style. The rainbow tariffs pass 1. Ember gold plus 1.5 L's duty .2. Geyser green plus 1 L .3. Aurora violet provisional plus 2 L's until odor tests .4. Sulfur sunrise deferred to goat pens. 0 duty with hazard pay. Tariff ladder will hang in the market. Goats replaced by human clerks to check dawn/noon/dusk angles with sundial anklets. Bjorn will forge tonight. The law speaker stamps the decree using a seal dipped in glow moss ink. Official documents now illuminate like bedtime night lights. Celebration time. Brinja hosts a mini fashion runway. Models read, volunteers bribed with biscuits. Strut wearing tunics pieced from every approved dye. Glow sheep provide footlights. Whisper posts whisper commentary. Too bold. Needs goat-proof hem. You clap until palms sting, pockets rattling with ladder pebble and violet swatch. Dusk smears marmalade across glaciers, perfect for tariff graphs. Gurin sketches curves on parchment. Cloth flow, duty intake, goat satisfaction index. She grins, quill tapping a column titled Future Research. Smugglers versus beige. You promise to supply anecdotal surveillance, raven willing. Dinner. Salmon baked inside embergold bread crust, served with violet berry compote. Flavor pops like edible fireworks. Even Thorstein quits rhyming mid-bite. Afterward, drummers gather near the river, their rhythms reflecting sundial anklets ticking in firelight. The valley feels like a living kaleidoscope, every note, scent, and hue tumbling through slow rotation. You wander to Willowherb Rise, banners glowing in aurora. From this angle you see the tariff ladder thread shimmering across the market like a frozen rainbow. Fence finder ambles over, nuzzles your palm for valerian. You oblige, tassel bells chiming a lullaby. Above, the raven traces lazy circles, ribbon sash fluttering, satisfied curator of color. Back at your booth, you arrange loot. Raven ladder pebble, aurora violet test cloth, tariff biscuit crumbs. Lavender sachet still rules the olfactory roost but now mingles with distant sulfur, berry, and dye steam. You sink onto wool blankets, magma heartbeat pulsing beneath like a loom shuttle weaving molten cloth. Outside, whisper posts share final bulletins. Tariff ladder hung. Sundial anklets calibrated. Nap always, dawn discount ends soon. You smile, eyelids dimming. In dream space you stroll markets where goats run cash registers and tunics glow under moonlight, each shade priced by star sparkle. Thingvellir exhales a chromatic sigh, tucking you under its multi-hued quilt. Sleep paints itself ember gold, geyser green, and a promise. Tomorrow, even the sky might file for a luxury tax on sunsets. The sky wakes wearing aurora violet, and your first conscious thought is, oh, tariff surcharge before breakfast. You crawl from blankets, lavender sachet batting your chin, and notice the raven perched on the sundial anklet Bjorn forged overnight. The bird taps its beak on the bronze gnomon, as if already billing you for dawn hour rates. Fence finder jingles outside, tassel fluffed, bells clacking up and pay. Joke one slides in before you've even located your boots. Today the Alting convenes for timekeeping calibration. Because sundial anklets are beautiful until someone shows up at noon pricing with a shadow still stuck on breakfast. You slog through dewy grass to the low rock where the law speaker, cloak upgraded with strips of aurora violet, twirls a portable sandglass the size of a carrot. He announces, from this moment, dusk begins when the top grain drops, and any trader arguing otherwise will sweep goat pens. Mainstream historical fact clicks into place. Medieval Iceland relied on sundials and water clocks, yet assemblies often made ad hoc declarations of time blocks. Exact minutes mattered less than community consensus. Now consensus needs straps and sand. First demonstrator is Scully Stargage, an amateur astronomer whose beard could shelter a small library. He claims his bronze anklet gains 2 breath beats daily and offers to recalibrate all devices using the constellation Swan's Rising. Gurin counters with ledger evidence that commerce stalls during astronomy lectures. Markets need quicker fixes than stargazing TED Talks. Fringe tidbit shoots across the firmament. A scrap of saga says certain farmers trimmed sheep shadows at solstice to predict will yield. Historians still argue whether that was protophenology or just an excuse to wave scissors under the midnight TO test drift. Bjorn sets 3 anklets on a basalt slab, aligns gnomons to true east, and waits. Within heartbeats the raven lands, nudges one anklet half a hair clockwise, then hops back innocently polishing its ribbon sash. Everyone groans. Joke 2 preens its feathers. The law speaker therefore suggests triple redundancy. Sundial anklet plus sandglass plus whisper post-chime at set intervals. Thorstein half-clip lugs a herring barrel, chops it into quarters, and mounts bronze tongues inside. Thingveller's first public chime bell. You're drafted to record time signals, earning the honorary title TikTok Marshal. Your tools: chalk, clipboard, and your own sleep-deprived heartbeat. Mid-morning. Tests commence. The raven pecks the gnomon exactly when the sandglass flips. Fence finder's bells follow half a second later, surprisingly accurate. A goat panelist wanders by, sniffs the arrangement, and indicates approval by headbutting the barrel bell. Unplanned but on schedule. Joke 3 rings louder than the chime. Data flows to Guriness ledger. She plots shadow drift versus goat impact, producing a squiggly graph that looks like FenceFinder tried abstract art. Still, it proves sundial anklets lag during cloud cover, sandglasses misbehave on slanted tables, and goats are punctual only when food arrives. Open scholarly debate phrase floats up as a monk remarks. Historians still argue whether medieval timekeeping aimed for precision or merely provided conversation starters. Lunch. Glowmoss pancakes drizzled with nettle syrup, advertised at early bird tariff, though it's clearly past midday. You point this out. The vendor flips his sundial anklet sideways and winks. Vertical shadows equal discount. Joke 4 soaks up syrup. Afternoon workshop. Build shadow boards around market booths, small slats marked with dye-color notches. Traders place anklets against boards. If the shadow lands on your dye strip, tariff matches. Ember gold notch at the top. Sulfur sunrise hidden behind just in case someone wants an olfactory adventure. You help hammer boards, remembering yesterday's smell census goats and praying they don't chew the new infrastructure. Testing phase. Brinja sells 2 Ls of ember gold. Her board shows shadow smack on the top notch, full duty ode. The customer sighs, pays extra plain cloth, then cheers when Thorstein's chime bell announces, tariff happy hour. A promotional gimmick he rings whenever clouds cover the sun, dropping duties by half. The law speaker scowls, but marketing genius can't be outlawed before supper. Late afternoon clouds indeed roll in, flattening all shadows. Confusion erupts. Traders argue over frozen tariffs. Scully insists we switch to star time early, and a goat steals the sandglass carrot. Fencefinder restores order by trotting straight through the debate. Bells clanging the Morse code equivalent of chill. Everyone laughs. Conflict deflates like a punctured wineskin. Emergency clause drafted. During full cloud cover, whisper posts will relay time beats every 100 heartbeats, measured by the TikTok Marshal. You tie a ribbon around your wrist, tap pulses, and whisper beat 1 into the stone. Partner post echoes beat 1 valley-wide. System surprisingly works. Echoes sync traders and goats adapt by chewing at rhythmic intervals. Goat metronomes. Somebody patent that. Evening sun returns just in time for official vote. Provisions pass 1. Sundial anklet remains primary point 2. Sandglass backup must be goat-proof point 3. Whisper beat only during cloud clause. Signaled by triple chime point 4. Thorstein allowed 1 happy hour ring per day to preserve sanity and commerce. The law speaker seals decree with glow ink sigil. Document now pulses violet each heartbeat. Apt reminder of your new job. Drummers celebrate with a tempo-matching whisper beats. Children dance shadow puppets on boards. Even the raven claps wings in April 4th. Dinner. Barley risotto tinted geyser green, served clock face style with trout slices at 12, 3, 6, 9. You eat clockwise, savoring punctuality. Nearby, Gurin drafts tomorrow's agenda. Regulate molten marigold, smuggling rumors. Thanks, Raven. Fencefinder curls at your feet, tassel rising and falling like a slow pendulum. Night descends, aurora waving glitchy neon. Shadow boards rest, anklets laid on tables, sandglasses emptied for cleaning. You stroll to your booth, pockets jangling. Mini barrel bell shard, souvenir, goat nod sandglass knob, and ember gold crumb pancake. Lavender sachet greets, mingling perfume with brass, syrup, and mineral night air. Under blankets you feel magma heartbeat below, echoing day's whisper beats. Steady, ancient conductor keeping history on tempo. Through the turf roof, You hear a final chime. Thorstein's happy hour ring redeemed at the last legal moment. Laughter carries, stones murmur nap always. And you succumb. Dream stage unfurls. Sundial anklets orbit like moons, goats run clock towers, and shadow boards bloom into rainbow ladders. Time, tariffs, and bells dance together, all syncing to the universal lullaby that Thingvellir hums to every sleeper beneath its twilight sky. A tiny clank wakes you, Thorstein's barrel bell fragment rolling off your bedside pouch, striking the obsidian shard with a delicate ping. Dawn itself seems to yawn. The sky blushes faint ember gold before sliding into gentle grays, clouds stretching like sleepy cats. You inhale lavender mint air, throw off blankets, and nearly step on fence finder, whose snoozing doorway fashion, tassel draped across the threshold like a do-not-disturb rope. One polite nudge and he rises, shaking bells into a sparkly arpeggio that whispers, "Morning meeting in 5 heartbeats." Joke 1 vibrates between his horns, word drifted overnight, literally via whisper beat, that today the Althing will debate the most crucial domestic question yet, pillow stuffing standards. All that new glow moss, surplus nettle floss, and fines paid in cheese curd crumbs have folks experimenting with bedtime tech. Some pillows now squish, some crunch, others glow like uneasy lanterns. Chaos threatens sweet dreams. Lawmakers must intervene to the law rock. The law speaker stands cloakless, an unthinkable rarity, holding 3 lumpy cushions at arm's length like misunderstood ferrets. He clears his throat and mainstream historical fact fluffs into view. While medieval Icelandic inventories list beds, bolsters, and even imported down, there's scant mention of standardized fillings. Household stuffed whatever was soft, warm, and available. Today, Thingvellir wants predictable nap quality, especially after nap always became unofficial valley motto. First speaker is Halla Hushweaver, artisan behind yesterday's nettle silk experiments. She promotes a tri-layer design. Moss core for coolness, nettle batting for firmness, outer fleece for cuddly feel. Thorstein counters, waving a prototype pillow packed with dried trout scales. He claims the gentle rustle inspires ocean dreams and repels midnight midges. Fringe tidbit flips onto its belly. A 13th century trader once bragged about pillows stuffed with puffin beaks for heroic posture. Historians still argue whether that was ergonomic bravado or just a tall, beaky tale. Testing begins. You're drafted into the Squish and Symphonics panel, whose task is to thump, hug, and listen. Halla's moss pillow sighs pleasantly. Thorstein's fish scale sack crackles like a scroll being unrolled in a quiet library. Sigrid supplies a third entry, pure raw fleece so springy it launches your chin upward when you test flop. Laughter ripples. Joke 2 springs along, forgiving your bruised ego. For data integrity, Gurin produces the snorometer, essentially a hollow goat horn filled with sand. Place it near a sleeper. Vibration counts transfer to tick marks. The mediator raises an eyebrow. Open scholarly debate phrase appears as he notes. Historians will later debate whether goat horn actigraphy advanced sleep science or merely justified afternoon naps. Trial volunteers promptly stretch on turf mats. Fencefinder stations himself as security, bells muted under a scrap of aurora violet to avoid bias. While sleepers, sleep, you escort Brynja to Skipper Steam where she steeps leftover dinettles in hot mineral water, creating aromatic pillow sachets. She hands you one. Scent of citrus pepper fills nostrils, chasing away pastry cravings. You pocket it beside Raven Goodies. Curio pouch starts resembling a traveling apothecary. Back at the Lowell Rock, test subjects stir. Results. Moss plus nettle combo yields soft size and minimal horn ticks. Fish scale pillow provokes restless rustles and one muttered complaint about gills. Raw fleece propels sleeper into brief levitation, followed by impressive snore trifecta. Crowd charts findings on a dyed yarn board. Green for calm, blue for restless, red for comic airborne moments. Law tweaks follow. Proposed standard, 1. Core layer must compress under one gentle fist. Demonstrated by elderly goat herd with sweetest fists in valley. Point 2. Audible rustle limited to 2 crackles per head turn. Point 3. Pillow odor must not overpower lavender sachet baseline. Established by unanimous sniff panel. Thorstein pouts. But the law speaker offers compromise. Fish scale pillows approved for daytime meditation cushions, subject to midge monitoring. Everyone applauds. Joke 3 crackles approvingly. Tio celebrate. The cooks unveil pillow cakes. Little domes of barley sponge injected with air so each bite collapses in a satisfying puff. You chomp one, crumb cloud exhaling like a mini feather burst. A monk suggests including cakes in future stuffing. Imagine dream snacking by osmosis. You nod with faux seriousness. Sugar has broken silliness barrier. Afternoon workshop shifts to dreamscaping, optional embroidery lessons where you stitch runic lullabies onto pillowcases. Aldous demonstrates chain stitch shaped like fjord silhouettes. Every loop locks in a consonant. She claims the tactile bumps under your cheek guide subconscious storytelling. You embroider a tiny barrel bell, because nocturnal timing jokes never sleep. Meanwhile, the raven organizes a side hustle, swapping shiny beads for rejected fish scales. It piles them into a makeshift mattress on a crag ledge. Quirky entrepreneur indeed. Evening votes proceed swiftly. Pillow stuffing standards pass. Enforcement. At quarter courts, any pillow traded must undergo the squish tap sniff test. 1 squeeze, 1 ear press, 1 aromatic waft. Fail 2 of 3. Reclassified as seat cushion. Sigurd volunteers to stamp compliant items with a tiny sheep silhouette inside a crescent moon. Adorable QC seal. With decree sealed in glow ink. Scalds premiere gentle lullaby verses to accompany new bedding season. Drums absent tonight, only finger snaps allowed, ensuring hush thick enough to blanket sky. Dinner glimmers under lamplit banners. Trout stew ladled over moss-green dumplings. Apt homage to pillow victory. Fence finder receives first certified moss nettle cushion. He nose boops it, folds knees and promptly dreams. Bells reduced to lazy breathing metronome. You follow suit at your booth. New pillow already awaiting. Lavender sachet tucked into its corner. Rune bell embroidery catching starlight. You lay your head, noticing the moss coolness, nettle hug, and barely audible rustle of driftwood dreams beneath. Whisper posts murmur drowsy headlines. Standardized slumber secured. Fish scale futures mixed. Nap always, quality guaranteed. Magma heartbeat thrums far below, sinking to slow exhale. You drift softly, knowing Thingvellir has regulated rest itself, and tomorrow even the clouds may file snore reports. Sleep's gate glides open. You walk through on moss-padded paths, every footfall a hush, every breath a lullaby. Late dawn mist drifts across Thingvellir, curling around the freshly planted story stones like curious cats sniffing new furniture. You wake beneath your turf roof, lavender sachet pulsing its now familiar calm, and notice the rune bell embroidery on yesterday's pillow glimmering faintly, as if the stones spent the night teaching textile. Fence finder noses the flap open, bells chiming a gentle up, scholar motif, while the raven taps a claw against your curio pouch, clearly impatient for another headline. Joke 1 caws itself into the chill. Even birds respect press deadlines. Outside, the low rock hosts a mosaic of runic slabs awaiting distribution along the valley's paths. The law speaker, cloak streaked with ember gold highlights that catch the early light, reviews volunteers carrying sledges of basalt like oversized dominoes. Today's plan: position story stones at memory nodes, markets, pasture gates, hot spring footpaths, so wanderers can trace tales wherever they roam. Mainstream historical fact slots smoothly into the briefing. Medieval waymarkers called Nidstong once bore runes to warn off enemies. Thingvellir stones invert that tradition, inviting friends to linger and learn. First destination: Blue Hills Ridge, where silent sheep graze their bead-clacking metronome. You join the wagon team, gripping a rope slick with morning frost. Halfway up, Thorstein Halfclip appears in fish-scale meditation vest, insisting rhythmic rustle improves traction. Fencefinder rolls eyes, best as a ram can, and adds horsepower with a determined shove. Atop the ridge, the crew lowers the slab, revealing runes depicting the Glowmoss pancakes fiasco. Your cheeks warm remembering syrup negotiations. Puffin Pin Mediator asks for the ceremonial first trace. You step forward, fingers finding grooves, and suddenly hear faint echo of past laughter. The rustling fish scale pillow test, goats timing tariffs, the hush before fingersnap citations. Whether imagination or basalt acoustics, the experience earns a soft gasp from onlookers. Fringe tidbit flits in. One folktale claims basalt absorbs airborne stories like thirsty moss, releasing them when touched by kind intention. Historians still argue whether that's proto-psychology or marketing by ancient quarry guilds. Next, stone heads toward Skipper's Steam. Mid-haul, Bjorn fires up a scale prototype rune cart. Wooden wheels studded with iron runes that stamp mini-glyphs in mud. Everyone thrills at free branding until the cart hits a pothole, flinging a stone snacks basket skyward. Oat crumbs rain like edible confetti. Joke 2 sprinkles the path. Cleanup crew volunteers instantly. At the hot spring. Steam halos the slab in spade glamour. Brinja paints its grooves with diluted geyser green pigment, creating contrast without marring integrity. She mutters about launching runic highlighter kits, another souvenir angle. A monk nearby documents pigment durability tests. Steam exposure versus goat drool. Open scholarly debate phrase rises with the vapor. Historians still argue whether preservation favors raw stone austerity or artistic enhancement. The raven snatches Brinja's paintbrush, dabs one rogue emerald stroke, and parties off, proving art wants mischief. Lunch break unrolls by lamb's lichen bath. Barley stew laced with valerian, careful dosage to avoid sleepy committee. You share a bench with Aldous Inkbiter, who's drafting micropoems for each stone so visitors can compare oral versus tactile versions. She recites one line aloud. Basalt remembers what oxygen forgets. You fingersnap citation. She grins, tosses you a nettle sugar cube in payment. The afternoon assignment. A story stone near the whisper posts to create a feedback loop. Stone recalls echo, echo recalls stone. While sliding the slab into place, a gust of katabatic wind funnels between lava plates, making the rune grooves hum like low flutes. Sigrid jokes it's the valley practicing for its own symphony. Joke 3 harmonizes on cue. Someone fetches the snorometer horn to measure vibration. The sand dances inside like caffeinated dunes. Gurin marks the slab location on her growing parchment map titled Thingvellir Memory Circuit. She adds icons. Sheep lantern, trout scale drum, sulfur quarantine goat pen. You notice she's left room for 2 future stones labeled Surprise 1 and Surprise 2. Foreshadowing always tastes like opportunity. Late daylight bathes willowherb rise in caramel. Last stone for today depicts the pillow stuffing decree. A carved goat horn and moss sprig intertwined in moon-shaped frame. Fence finder sniffs, approves, then curls beside, effectively christening it a nap zone. The law speaker records this precedent. Any runic slab blessed by first ram snooze gains rest stop status. Mainstream legal footnote nods. Medieval wayfarers valued church porches for sanctioned naps. Now Thingvellir has fleecy alternatives. With stones placed, an inaugural touch caravan sets off. Villagers stroll stone to stone, tracing runes, sharing impressions. You note patterns. Elders recall specific sagas. Children invent sequels featuring meteoric goat superheroes. Travelers pick business advice. Invest in moss futures. The mediator logs these reactions for future policy. User feedback before user exists. Essentially, evening feast celebrates successful installation. Smoked puffin sliders served on mini flatbreads stamped with rune wheel tracks. Edible brand synergy achieved. Thorstein performs new stanza praising basalt librarians. Each borrowed phrase gets fingersnap punctuation, echoing across stones like upscale applause. Glow sheep graze nearby, halos bouncing color off newly inked grooves. Ember gold banners ripple, catching auroral sparks as though sky scribbles second narratives. Later, while lanterns flicker low, you return alone to Blue Hill's slab. Tracing your earlier grooves again, you swear the stone now whispers a fresh line. Stories grow moss. Touch again. It might be wind or basalt memory warming, but you answer quietly, promising to keep touching, listening. Back in your booth, you inventory curio influx. Emerald paint splatter brush bristle, mini rune stamped footprint from the cart, nettle sugar cube half-eaten, and a pebble shaped suspiciously like Surprise 2. Lavender sachet absorbs steam aromas, morphing into citrus herb spa fragrance. You nestle against certified pillow, letting moss core cool one cheek while nettle batting supports the other. Through turf roof you hear story stones hum with settling heat, whisper posts echo soft wrap up, runes placed, tales traced, nap always touch tomorrow. Magma heartbeat thuds below, partnered by bead click sheep lullaby. Eyelids close, dreams rise, stones glow, runes rearrange midnight to spell new jokes, and raven registers copyright on the breeze. Thingvalar, belly full of freshly carved memories, exhales slow approval, rocking you in basalt arms until dawn chisels another chapter. You wake to a hush so complete it feels like the whole valley is holding its breath just for you. Pale dawn light filters through your turf roof and turns the runebell embroidery on your moss nettle pillow into tiny mirrors, each one winking, almost time. You sit up, lavender sachet tucked beneath your chin, and feel the steady magma heartbeat under the earth like a lullaby drum on its slow final verse. Fence finder noses the flap, tassel flicking ember gold sparks, bells chiming a half-speed arpeggio that translates, "Last chapter, friend. Let's make it gentle." Joke one tiptoes in with those muted chimes, politely refusing to wake anyone who isn't ready outside. A light mist furls around the newly planted story stones, their painted runes catching the first sunbeams like sleepy fireflies. The law speaker stands beside the low rock, cloak now an exquisite patchwork panel of every dye the valley approved. Ember gold, geyser green, aurora violet, even a tiny strip of sulfur sunrise discreetly hidden near the hem, just far enough from curious noses. He calls today's gathering the weaving, a morning devoted to binding all the loose threads of the season into one final braid before winter's quiet settles in. Mainstream historical fact rises with his voice. Medieval Icelandic assemblies traditionally ended with an autumning farakop, when delegates received travel stipends and the law code was read one last time to ensure memory carried it safely through the dark months. The first item is the ceremonial echo braid. Whisper posts relay a gentle beat, 5 pulses, signaling everyone to bring one small token from the summer's debates. You follow a slow parade to the foot of Blue Hill. Bjorn lays down his mini rune cart while stamped with yesterday's footprints. Brynja places a vial of leftover geyser green dye that shimmers when it breathes. Gurren offers a parchment corner mapping the memory circuit. Thorstein deposits a single fish scale polished like pearl. You add your raven-gifted ladder pebble. Fence finder steps forward, lowers his head, and drops a tassel bell onto the growing pile. The crowd sighs, soft, collective, satisfied. Next comes the fringe farewell. Aldous Inkbiter recites a 4-line stanza rumored to summon dream sheep who clip worries from sleepers. Fringe tidbit glitters. Some scattered manuscripts mention nocturnal flocks that trim nightmares the way silent use nibble meadow edges. Historians still argue whether the reference is literal livestock lore or a poetic metaphor for cognitive housekeeping. The stanza floats upward, catches on a shy gust, and escapes toward sunrise like a paper kite. The law speaker invites you to tie the echo braid together with willow twine dyed from nettle baths. Your fingers work slowly, weaving pebble, scale, parchment, dye vial, bell, and will into a single dangling charm. When you finish, the braid glows faintly. Perhaps the glow moss paint, perhaps shared memory warming itself one last time. You hang it on the central story stone. Runes hum like a cat settling on a windowsill. Joke 2 hums with them, joking that even stones purr when well fed at mid-morning. Sigrid oversees the closing comfort census. Revisiting pillow standards. Volunteers sprawl on turf mats near willowherb rise, heads on certified moss nettle cushions, snorometer horns ticking slow in the grass. You lie back too, noticing how each inhale picks up autumn's first hint. Crisp birch, distant snowmelt. The raven hops across sleepers, tucking stray threads into cases like a meticulous butler, then steals a single nettle fiber for its own nest. Payment never ends. After the census, the law speaker reads the final article, the quiet clause, a promise that any new law must pass the sleep test. If implementation would disturb valley dreams more than it helps, it waits until spring. Open scholarly debate phrase floats as a monk notes. Historians still argue whether restful societies innovate slower or simply more kindly. Everyone nods. The whispering stones hum agreement. Lunch is ceremonial and light. herb broth with barley pearls, served in horn cups etched with the new sheep and moon QC seal. You sip slowly, warmth sliding down like a silk ribbon, and let your gaze wander over banners flapping in a lazy wind. Ember gold flashes, geyser green calms, aurora violet hides shyly in cloud shade, and even sulfur sunrise seems to have ceded its eggy protest. Blending into autumn haze, the afternoon melts into gratitude walk. You follow winding paths, touching each story stone once more. At Blue Hill the slab still murmurs laugh echoes. Near Skipper's steam it exhales herbal mist. By the whisper posts you feel faint vibrations spelling nap always. When you reach the final slab, a brand new one set today depicting the echo braid itself, you trace the rune of your own contribution. A tiny ladder leading upward into open sky. Your fingertip tingles, and for a heartbeat you think you smell lavender and goat cheese at once. Perfect Thingvellir perfume. Sunset approaches on silent feet, brushing glaciers with pink gold. The law speaker climbs his crate one last time, voice quieter than you've ever heard it. He thanks ravens for courier service, goats for timekeeping, sheep for silent restraint, and magma for its eternal metronome. He ends with a bow so deep you fear the cloak patches will rip, but they hold, woven tight as the community they symbolize. A single finger snap starts the twilight music. Drummers answer with slow shushes on stretched hide. Finger snaps ripple outward like dewdrops. Fence finders' bells chime in minor thirds, lulling pulse downward. The valley sighs. The whisper posts echo a last bulletin. All tales filed. Rest well. You recline against warm basalt, lavender sachet under your nose, and watch stars wink on. First one, then 5, then a whole flock of celestial sheep glowing brighter than moss. Somewhere to your left the raven drops its final ribbon onto your lap. A thanks, a full stop, a bookmark. You tuck it into your pouch and feel inside. Pebble, rune shard, nettle cube, tiny flute, biscuit crumbs, sulfur crystal, sandglass knob. Each a chapter weightless and cherished. Joke 3 dusts your mind. Luggage fees in dreamland must be terrifying. But laughter fades into a smile that spreads like warm honey. The law speaker whispers, "May your dreams be law-abiding," and steps off the crate, cloak settling like dusk's curtain. You tilt your head, let eyelids drift, and the last images you see are story stones glowing faintly, echo braids swaying, and fence finder lowering onto moss with a contented groan. Everything stills, breath slows, and Thingvellir wraps itself around you. A final, perfect blanket of hush. The sky deepens from violet to velvety blue, and the valley settles into the kind of quiet that makes even thoughts speak in whispers. You breathe in slowly, lavender's steady comfort mingling with the faint mineral warmth still rising from the basalt beneath you. Each exhale releases a thread of any lingering tension, letting it drift upward until it unravels in the cool evening air. Around you, story stones dim to a gentle pulse, their runes no brighter than distant fireflies. The whisper posts fall silent, saving their echoes for tomorrow. Sheep bells hush. Even fence finder's tassel lies perfectly still, like a bookmark resting between pages. In the hush, you notice the magma heartbeat under the earth. Slow, steady, older than any tale. Its rhythm matches your own with perfect, patient certainty. You let shoulders soften, feeling gravity's calm invitation. Fingers uncurl, palms warming against the ground. Thoughts that once hopped like playful goats now wander off to slow chew twilight grass. There is no list to remember, no debate awaiting your vote, no tariff clock to track. Just the silky glide of breath in, breath out, breath in. Above, stars knit themselves into a quiet net, stretching from glacier ridge to willow fence, promising that nothing important can slip away tonight. You let the net hold you. Inside, your pillow cradles the curve of your cheek, moss core cool, nettle batting supportive, lavender sachet releasing the last, featherlight sigh of fragrance. I end this gentle dark, the valley has nothing more to ask of you. Only that you rest, float, drift. So you do. You allow eyelids to settle like dusk's final curtain, and with a slow, content breath, you surrender to sleep's soft tide, knowing every story is safely tucked within stone and sky until dawn writes a new beginning.